with family here. And yes, thank you.
Wonderful to have you with us. And well, as you are used to by now, we are going to be connecting to our help desk so that they introduce us to the program of the day. And at the help desk, we've got Mehdi and Ainara. Are you there? Can you hear us?
Hello, Emilia. We hear you perfectly. Thank you so much. It's really a pleasure to be here today with you in this second day of the 2021 UCLG annual retreat. I am Ainara Fernandez from UCLG Research, and together with Mehdi, I'll be your Sherpa for the day.
Bonjour à tous, bienvenue. Je suis donc Mehdi Maupin du département financier de CGLU. Donc, nous allons vous présenter maintenant le programme pour cette deuxième journée du séminaire. Donc, nous allons commencer maintenant par la session plénière sur les priorités résultant de l'expérience Citizen Listening, et ce jusqu'à 15h30. Et ensuite, nous allons enchaîner sur 5 sessions en parallèle, donc les sessions en petits groupes. Nous aurons tout d'abord la séance sur migration et la charte de Lampedusa. Nous aurons parallèlement à ça la séance sur l'accessibilité. Parallèlement à ça, nous aurons également une séance sur la génération égalité. Autre séance droit numérique. Et enfin, une dernière séance sur le thème repenser la coopération au développement pour les gouvernements locaux.
And then we'll take it from there and we'll go back to plenary to take stock until 4:30. Then at 4:30, we'll go into a little break until 4:45. And right after we come back from the break, we'll go back to plenary to have the last session of the day, which will be advocating with UCLG. Before giving the connection back to the main stage, we would also like to remind you that as Sherpas, we will be available for you to reach out to us whenever you have a doubt or a question on the help desk, which you can access by clicking on the Zoom link that will be shared on the chat. That being said, we hand over the floor back to you to the main stage, Emilia.
Thank you very much, Ainara and Mehdi. Well, quite a program that they have presented. Just to recall for everybody, the breakout sessions will be in parallel. Everything has interpretation, so you can all choose to join in any of those sessions that are of interest to you. And of course, you will be hearing back, and many of the topics are going to be introduced during the main debate. Massimo, we are trying to make our colleagues feel as if we were together, and this is why we are creating new spaces, and I understand you're going to introduce one of them.
Yes, thank you very much, Amelia. I'd be happy to. So during this retreat, we would like to use and propose to use a new tool called Mural, which you will see on your screen soon. It's imagine as if we were together and we were using a whiteboard. Well, this would be a digital whiteboard. You can see it right over here, and it's organized based on, well, our pact for the future, or of course on the structure of the program for this retreat. So you'll see there is a dedicated space for people, for planet, and for government. And below, you'll see that there are post-its and areas where you can share your ideas, your resources, anything that you would like us to know based on the discussions of today. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much. I hope that many of you will be using Mural. Of course, you also can exchange ideas through the chat. You can also wander about in Wonder and meet each other. But just please keep in mind that the moment we close the session, we will lose what has been said in the chat, while what you keep in Mural is what will stick with us, and we will be building on our work program, etc., on those contributions. So please don't hesitate using that. And today, well, the session dedicated to people. People are at the heart of the work of local and regional governments. The constituency that we represent is at the heart of your day-to-day work, and is, of course, a very, very important act of the work that we do in UCLG and of our Pact for the Future. So we've got a video that we want to share with you. A video that brings the voices of one very important instrument that we have, a mechanism of advice, which is called Ubuntu, and that most of you are acquainted with. Colleagues, whenever you want.
need to change how we relate to each other as communities at the grassroots. And I think that means changing how local governments function and how the local governments are linked to your national, provincial, whatever it is, in higher levels. If we do not bring people together at that level to be more sustainable, to be helping each other, I think we're not going to be sustainable as a planet.
From UCLG, we need to think recognition of the diversity and redistribution. We need to recognize, to place inequality, we need to feminize politics.
I will promote the co-creation and network of academics to be part of this movement for innovative development of our cities around the world.
This is a seminal year for advancing the global climate change agenda. Climate change is one thing you cannot self-isolate from. You certainly can't vaccinate a city again.
And if we can really explore what it means to activate, to let loose radical imaginaries, I think that will feed into a lot of the technical policy issues that we've already listed.
We really need to focus on trying to build inter-urban system, and two priorities within that. One is to address the question of the commons in Jaipur, and that is we have to look at the global financial system and how the intergovernmental financial system works within nations of
There is an urgency for UCLG to take its mandate and your understanding of the politics and your most direct relationship with citizens and put in the technical component.
The retooling of the multilateral system, including the reform of the United Nations, has a built-in mechanism to ensure a sustained and meaningful voice and participation of local and regional government. Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Amelia.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Well, it feels like a year ago, but this was the first meeting we held this year in January only. And it was very empowering, I would say. It's a new material for YouTube. You were in the session, but you had not seen the video. What sticks with you, Massimo?
Well, to me, what really sticks is the fact that having seen all of these excerpts from the different Ubuntu advisors, you can really tell how cross-cutting and how transversal the advisory board is on all of the topics it shows. And it really gives the notion of co-creation, and that here we are talking about, well, not only listen to cities, but also cities are listening.
Wonderful.
Donc depuis cette vidéo, on voit aussi les synergies qu'on a cherché à créer à CGLU, notamment autour du pacte pour le futur. C'est ce qu'on va explorer aujourd'hui. Et donc, Emilia, peut-être tu pourrais nous dire un peu plus sur cet aspect qu'on va discuter, qui est sur le pacte pour les personnes et de ces efforts qu'on fait à CGLU depuis maintenant près d'un an après le congrès de Durban pour avancer sur cette vision pour le futur.
Yes, indeed, what I'm trying to do here is just give you some food for thought and to show you that we've got many tools and many building blocks of what we think this pact for the future can be. Obviously, this is a process of co-creation. And it is a process that will take several months until 22. So it's not like we know everything we want to say already, but we can know some of the key issues that we want to cover. And this is what I want to show you today. I want to show you some of the building blocks that our organization has been working on. And Amanda was saying to me just before starting the session, I feel as if we have been working around this for a very long time. I think that what we are adding now is the sense of urgency, the sense of taking out possibilities that we thought possible before and now we realize are no longer there, and a sense of solidarity and sticking together that is being very, very clear. So let me introduce you some of our core values to work in this axis on people for our pact for the future. Obviously, democracy, solidarity, equality, and rights. And rights is very high up on the agenda right now for us. I think this period of the pandemic has shown us that we need to rethink what we care about and who cares for us, and the rights that we need to build our government around. And those core values we have been working on through our committees. We have been working on also through our policy councils and our partnerships. The town hall process that led us to Durban and to produce policy recommendations on informality, but also on right to the city, on accessibility, so many topics have led to the organization of these joint sessions, Cities Are Listening sessions, which are the follow-up of the live learning experiences that guided us through the lockdown. And those partnerships are very, very critical for us in order to co-create this pact. It's a pact that we cannot no single sphere of government, no single stakeholder can do this alone. Of course, we still consider the SDGs as very critical building blocks. Not only, I would say, maybe more framework, they are still a very valid framework to push for that people's-oriented agenda. And we see the other global goals and global agendas as very critical as well for our local realities. We always say you can't be a mayor if you are not looking at the global perspective. If you need to think local and act global, you will need to take into account all of these agendas that are here. And we are entering a very critical year for the new urban agenda, which is actually what links us directly to the SDGs, what links service provision to the SDGs. The services that our constituency provides are a very critical input to that agenda. Of course, we have mechanisms such as our awards, our prizes. We acknowledge what our membership is doing around peace, culture, innovation, participatory democracy. And I hope during this plenary, some of those colleagues will speak up and bring up some of the ideas that they have. And we have an incredible legacy. We've got the legacy of Durban, our Durban political declaration, a decalogue that has been drafted during the pandemic, during the hardest times of the pandemic, looking into the future by our political leadership with 10 recommendations that are unavoidable. We've got a Rome Charter, also part and parcel of our work during the pandemic, going into cultural rights. Those second generation of rights are very, very important. And what is the objective at the end of the day? Well, the objective is safeguarding the dreams of the people, answering to their aspirations. So I will stop here. I just wanted to give you a glimpse of the complex ecosystem that we are working with. But I am certain that you will recognize yourself in that board, and I hope you find this interesting. And we have two inspirational talks that I want to invite you to listen to before we open the floor. I would like to welcome Alex Frediani, Principal Researcher, Human Settlements Group, International Institute for Environment and Development. Alex, thank you for being with us today as well after 1 year in Tangier. And thank you for inspiring us to put equality high on the agenda of United Cities and local governments. Welcome. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Emilia, and thank you, colleagues from UCLG, for this invitation. It's great to be here with you. I guess I have a little presentation, some slides that maybe we could put them up now in case you have
will
that.
see them. Yes.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you so much. This is fantastic technology, by the way. Well done, everybody, for this for the system that you put in place. So, as I was saying, it seems to me that well, as we are all aware, the pandemic has created and deepened inequality, and it has also highlighted the need to address it urgently. The pledge to leave no one and no place behind has been a key global agenda for several years, and it remains at the forefront of many conversations on post-pandemic recovery. This creates a political opportunity for redistributive local and regional agendas, yet one that we need to approach with caution. It seems to me that the equality agenda could be like a false friend. We all agree it is important, but we have very different understandings of what it is and how to advance it. I would say that to make this false friend into a true and progressive friend, we need an agenda that one reframes what we mean by inequality beyond income disparity and promotes local and regional pathways towards equality. Today, I will share some thoughts and insights on the second point, the pathways for urban and territorial equality as they are emerging from the Gold 6 reporting process. So last year, after the equality pitch I made to you that Emilia mentioned for the Gold 6 report, one of you asked me, if there is one way for us, local and regional governments, to advance equality, what would that be? Well, I was not able to answer you at that moment, and I took it back to the team and the Gold 6 process. And our place of departure has been to recognize that we need to move away from sectorial approaches and imagine pathways that address multiple actors and actions while promoting a different way of governing local and regional territories. After this year of dialogue about pathways of urban and territorial equality, I can tell you that we are building an agenda that identifies at least 6 different ways in which local and regional governments can advance the equality agenda. The caring pathway is about tackling the crisis of social welfare and poor infrastructure that lead to increased inter- and inter-territorial inequalities. This pathway highlights how local and regional governments can promote the care for diverse groups within society through safety nets, better access to support systems, and public policy. We know that women have been historically the main care providers within households and communities. This agenda is about recognizing the role and responsibility of all actors in providing care. This means reinvigorating the role of public sector through social protection schemes, health and education services, as well as the promotion of welcoming and sanctuary cities frameworks. The renaturing pathway, if we go to the next slide, addresses unsustainable urbanization tendencies, such as the deterioration of vital ecological systems and services, processes of green gentrification and spatial exclusion, and the externalization of risk to particular social groups and geographies. A pathway that renatures urbanization means overcoming economic dependency on natural resource extraction and on carbon-intensive development that together exacerbates social inequalities and environmental injustices. In practice, local and regional government can promote renaturing through urban greening interventions, building just ecological transitions within and beyond cities, and promoting rights-based policy frameworks that inject social justice considerations into the pursuit of environmental sustainability. A key area of action is around making food systems more sustainable while at the same time guaranteeing everyone's right to food. The connecting pathway captures the policies, interventions, and programs that increase the links and accessibility within and across territories, and between urban, peri-urban, and rural areas and citizens. It recognized the role of local and regional governments in responding to social spatial segregation, as well as to the digital divide manifested in localities and regions. This pathway promotes the governance and planning of transport, infrastructure, and connectivity, including IT, in ways that enhance access and opportunities for poor and vulnerable groups within and between territories. The prospering pathway recognizes that processes of capital accumulation reinforced by globalization have been key drivers deepening local and regional inequalities, leading to the precarization of work and livelihoods, as well as greater concentration of wealth and opportunities. As a response, the prospering pathway is about local and regional governments promoting models of local economic development that recognize diverse economies and capture the multidimensional nature of economic outcomes. Making productive activities more inclusive and equitable requires improving capabilities of workers and enterprises, particularly those from marginalized sectors such as the informal sector. It requires improving the regulation of working conditions, for instance, on issues of health, safety, and security. And finally, it's about imagining density and interconnectedness of economic activities in ways that distribute opportunities rather than concentrate them, securing decent work and promoting green technologies and a circular economy. The commoning pathway is about addressing the commodification and the financialization of services and goods by building more collective forms of designing, managing, and using cities and regions. In terms of concrete actions, it is about promoting policy frameworks that encourage greater collectivization in the production of housing and basic services, such as participatory ways of improving neighborhoods and upgrading informal settlements, as well as the co-production of water and sanitation services. It is also about promoting policy frameworks that identify mechanisms for local and regional governments to better regulate land and housing markets in ways that push for equality outcomes. And finally, the democratizing pathway underlines that meaningful participation is a non-negotiable component of the equality agenda. The equality agenda needs to recognize how participatory practices can secure human rights and democratize local and regional decision-making. This pathway highlights the need to support civil society and local stakeholders so that they can advance inclusive agendas and hold local and regional governments to account. This means recognizing various different ways of getting one's voice heard, which can include cultural practices, petitions, as well as social audits. This pathway advocates for meaningful opportunities to formulate local and regional policy democratically. It requires resources and procedures in local and regional governments to recognize, validate, and support bottom-up and co-produced strategies. Finally, the democratizing pathway is about enabling participatory ways of delivering projects and programs in ways that open up possibilities to connect democratic delivery with democratic policy formulation. Well, I'm finishing here. This pathway suggests how local and regional governments, in collaboration with other actors, can mobilize an equality agenda. The pathways are still in the making, as they are being discussed through the Gold 6 process. Please continue engaging with the report so that we can make sure that the agenda of equality becomes an engine for real change. Thank you again for this opportunity.
Really, Rock. Thank you very much for this presentation, and thank you for this very clear path. I think that nobody in the audience today has doubts that all of those pathways are extremely relevant for our work. And I want to pick up on the first one that you mentioned, the caring one, which is of particular importance for us, of course, in this pandemic. And I invite you to listen carefully to the next intervention, because I think you're going to identify a lot with this. And I will ask you to come back on this. Okay, Alex? So we're going now to Michael Factory. He's the United Nations Special Rapporteur on Right to Food. He has a pre-recorded message because in Boston is really, really early where he's based, so he couldn't make it today. But listen to what he has to say. It's extremely important for the discussions today.
Hello, my name is Michael Factory, and I am the United Nations Special Rapporteur on the Right to Food. This means that the UN has authorized me to be the leading authority on the right to food. I'm sorry that I cannot speak to you live today, but due to the pandemic and time zone differences, I have to provide this video instead. I do wish that I could have joined you for your annual retreat because I believe that cities and local governments are key global players in making people's everyday life better. I presented some of my views on how to tackle COVID-19 in my latest report to the UN Human Rights Council, which you can find online. Governments are trying to strike a balance between health and wealth. If they attend to people's health by locking everything down, they bring the economy to a halt and destroy people's livelihoods. If they prioritize the economy and emphasize production and growth, then a large number of people will continue to get sick, become weak, or die. A common way to frame the issue has been in terms of trade-offs. As infection rates decrease, governments can open up the economy more. But when the pandemic worsens, governments impose safety measures that may slow down economic productivity. But thinking in terms of trade-offs has analytical limitations. It pits health against livelihoods. It assumes that by focusing more on people's health, there is inevitably an economic cost and vice versa. That way of thinking has been reactive and has not tackled the inherent inequities that are making the effects of the pandemic brutal and prolonged. However, I found that it is useful to frame the COVID-19 pandemic as a crisis of care. If you frame the pandemic as a crisis of care, hello, my name is Michael Packer, and I am the United Nations Special Rapporteur on the Right to Food. This means that the UN has authorized me to be the leading authority on the right to food.
Sorry, colleagues, we had a technical problem. What I propose to you is that we will find a solution so that we can take the video back from the moment that he's starting to talk about care, because that is exactly the part that I wanted you to listen to. If we focus on that care issue, if we rethink what is essential, if we rethink our public service provision, he argues, then we will have a totally different model. And I wanted before we open the floor, and there are many participants, so I think we will have a very rich discussion. I wanted to go first to Amanda. Amanda, this axis around people, what does it mean for you mostly, for the work that you have been doing with the committee?
Merci Emilia, effectivement c'est une question centrale pour nous. On a travaillé au sein de CGLU avec un grand nombre de pouvoirs locaux et depuis des années pour travailler sur cette approche des droits humains au niveau local, voir comment ils pouvaient alimenter les questions et le débat autour des politiques publiques locales. Et donc, c'est avec grand plaisir qu'on vient apporter aussi cette contribution et enrichir la discussion avec ce travail sur les droits humains. On est en train en ce moment de réfléchir autour du pacte pour le futur et de concrétiser cette approche-là à partir de l'expérience des pouvoirs locaux.
And in fact, this emphasis on rights, on the right-based agenda, is going to be the topic of our renewed strategic agreement with the Office of the UN Commissioner on Human Rights. So a very important part of our work, certainly. And Massimo, from the policy area that you have been looking at, both in your work with Urban 20, but also facilitating some of the communities of practice, this issue of new generation of rights is becoming very interesting. So in relation to the breakout session we will have today, what would you add to this?
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you for that. I think going back to what Michael Fakhri, the Special Rapporteur on the Right to Food, was saying with regards to trade-offs, is that you can't really look at this crisis or as to rights as a trade-off. And I think this is a good segue into our Pact for the Future and also into the way we view the next generation of human rights, meaning that one does not take substitute over the other. And that means that the right to food remains super relevant, the right to technology remains super relevant, digital rights, the right to privacy. These are all on the same level when we talk about this next generation. And of course, as Emilia was mentioning, today we'll be having breakout sessions on various of those topics. So we'll be going more into detail, particularly on digital rights.
Yeah, in a way, what we have been discussing is, and also with our Ubuntu advisors, in particular, Edgar Peterson was talking about that, and he will be joining us tomorrow. He was arguing that some of the rights that we know now, some of the human rights that we know now, fail in their implementation because they are depending on the wrong sphere of government, because they are pinned and attached to the wrong sphere of government. Citizenship, in fact, is attached to member states, so to countries. But imagine a world where citizenship or some part of it would not be pinned to national governments, but rather to local governments, or a space where we could think of a global citizenship where that would be also fed with rights. So this is the type of conversation that we want to generate, in particular with our colleagues from civil society around this axis based on people. And I wanted to go back to Alex. Alex, I hope you can be with us for the coming half hour and hear some of the interventions that are going to be coming from the floor. But a very, very quick, under 1 minute reaction to this notion that we cannot address inequality on the basis of trades-off. How do you feel about it? And I do hope that we can see the video on the care crisis, because it would be interesting to have all the thoughts together. But Alice, some thoughts on pathways that are equally important.
Yeah, I totally agree, Emilia. And I think that's a very important point. We cannot start engaging into prioritization of one vis-a-vis the other. We're going to get into all sorts of ethical problems in such processes. And of course, we have a whole system of human rights kind of institutions that have been precisely putting us into focus the non-negotiable aspects of rights. And those are not trade-offs. They are non-negotiable. Participatory rights are non-negotiable. The right to adequate housing is non-negotiable. There's a series of non-negotiable rights that we need to protect. And those are not only commitments, those are obligations that nation states have signed to, and that they need to be held to account and to help us in actually implementing that in practice. So yeah, I think this is a very important point, that we don't start making things relative, and actually we hold on to our human rights systems that is so important to us.
That's what's so important about having embraced the idea of equality as the very topic of our flagship exercise on research. It is the proof that our constituency and our World Organization no longer sees inequalities as an option. Inequality is no longer an option. You cannot make trade-offs, and I think that's the big difference that we are going to see. So thank you very much, Alex. Stick around so that I can give you the floor back when we have heard from the other speakers. Y yo creo que ahora tenemos ya conectado, ¿verdad?, al secretario de Cultura de la Ciudad de Buenos Aires, Enrique Abogadro, que nos recibió con mucho cariño, lleno de abrazos, de tango y de muchas cosas más en nuestra cumbre de cultura no hace mucho. Enrique, ¡uy! ¡Qué veranito más rico tenéis ahí! ¡Qué envidia! Gracias por estar con nosotros y pensamientos sobre esta parte de la agenda, derechos culturales. ¿Dónde situamos a la cultura? Nosotros decimos que es un antídoto para muchos de nuestros problemas. ¿Dónde las ves tú?
Bueno, Emilia, primero, muchas gracias por la invitación. Aclaro que hoy es un día de vacaciones en Argentina, por eso estoy fuera de la ciudad. Les pido disculpas si entra el viento de fondo o alguna vaca del campo argentino, pero aquí estamos. En cualquier caso, realmente entendemos que vivimos momentos de desafíos importantísimos, particularmente para los derechos culturales, en términos de para qué sirve la cultura realmente, ¿no? Hemos discutido muchísimo, digamos, sobre el valor económico de la cultura, la necesidad de agregar valor, pero la cultura tiene un valor más profundo que tiene que ver justamente con enriquecer nuestras vidas, y mucho más en este contexto de pandemia que atravesamos globalmente, en los cuales, digamos, la humanidad, digamos, realmente está enfrentando situaciones muy complejas. En el caso, por ejemplo, de nuestra región, con un aumento significativo de la pobreza y de la desigualdad, y allí la cultura tiene definitivamente algo para decir. Por eso quiero destacar el trabajo que estamos realizando y que venimos realizando desde la Comisión de Cultura, un trabajo que el año pasado ha tenido algunas notas importantísimas, como el caso de la Carta de Roma, por iniciativa justamente de nuestro colega en Roma, pero impulsado por toda la Comisión de Cultura, que nos ha puesto a trabajar definitivamente en cómo los derechos culturales son más relevantes que nunca en este contexto. Y muy brevemente, la experiencia de la Ciudad de Buenos Aires, de alguna manera puede y es replicada por otras ciudades, porque lo hemos trabajado en conjunto con muchas otras ciudades. Por un lado, cómo mantener la cultura abierta durante todos los cierres que hemos tenido. Abierta no significa necesariamente los espacios culturales abiertos, pero sí la cultura conectada con los ciudadanos, la cultura en condiciones de interpelarnos, de hacernos reflexionar. Luego las ayudas económicas a los sectores culturales. Luego justamente el trabajo para abrir los espacios de manera segura e intentar mantener abiertos esos espacios en la medida de que efectivamente estuvieran las posibilidades dadas. En este momento en la Ciudad de Buenos Aires, por suerte, con la totalidad de los espacios culturales funcionando, con aforos limitados, por supuesto, y con las restricciones que impone la pandemia, pero con la necesidad de mantener la cultura en movimiento. Y fundamentalmente, diría yo, la posibilidad o la obligación de repensar nuestro vínculo con la ciudadanía. De ahí, por ejemplo, el rol que ha tomado el espacio público, la ciudad como artefacto, digamos, fundamental que trae a la gente, que conecta, que vincula a las personas, y la cultura como justamente un gran llamador a ese espacio público. Estamos repensando nuestro vínculo con el espacio público, no solo el del Estado, sino el de los espacios culturales, el de quienes hacen cultura, de alguna manera imaginando nuevas posibilidades que muy probablemente van a continuar en el tiempo más allá de la pandemia. Y creo que eso es una muy buena noticia. Diría, para de alguna manera concluir, el rol central que tiene la cultura en el bienestar y la cohesión social que forzosamente tenemos por delante como desafío. La cultura construyendo puentes, la cultura permitiéndonos ver a las otras personas no como amenazas, sino como oportunidad en función justamente de la riqueza identitaria que trae cada una de esas personas, y la posibilidad de conectarnos a través de las fronteras, aprendiendo unos de otros, como hemos hecho a lo largo de toda esta pandemia. Nuevamente, destacar el trabajo que venimos haciendo en la Comisión de Cultura y agradecerle a todo el equipo, a Jordi, a todo el equipo, porque todo ya más de un año largo de pandemia hemos estado intercambiando experiencias, buenas prácticas. En nuestro caso, el lanzamiento de la web Cultura en Casa, que hoy ha mutado a Vivamos Cultura, se llama vivamoscultura.buenosaires.gov.ar, que ha servido de plataforma de intercambio con todas las ciudades de la red, y permitiéndonos conectar con la riqueza cultural de cada una de ellas. Así que destacar este trabajo conjunto y agradecer nuevamente la invitación a participar.
Recibe un abrazo virtual muy fuerte. Gracias por interrumpir también ese día de descanso que sé que te mereces mucho. Nos dejas con ese calorcito de ahí del hemisferio sur y con muchas ganas de seguir construyendo esos derechos culturales y el papel de la cultura en el centro de ese eje para las personas de nuestro Pacto para el Futuro. Muchas gracias, Enrique. Disfruta del día, pero por favor, sigue trabajando con nosotros. Gracias a ti, de verdad. And now I am going to go. I understand we have an elected official. In fact, is burgemeester van Opsterland. Welkom, Ellen. Wat goed om je hier te hebben met ons. Thank you for joining us. Ellen, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Emilia, Mrs. Saiz, and good afternoon to all of you. It's wonderful that we can meet in this way. It's also amazing that we are getting so accustomed to this kind of communication. And I must say that it's also very hopeful and encouraging that we all share these key values that you just explained, Emilia. Democracy, solidarity, equality, and rights. I think these are very important values to embrace, and I'm very glad that the new program is also elaborating on these values. I have only a small remark here that you can be assured that the VNG from the Netherlands is willing and prepared to contribute on a variety of these topics. And we like to be involved and co-create a good strategic program, and I hope we will succeed in doing that. One of the topics that should be addressed in my opinion and our opinion is there should be a close cooperation between rural and urban perspective, because the recovery after the pandemic should be a matter of a region with regional approaches, with global connectedness, and especially this regional perspective requires a good cooperation between government, local governments, education, farmers, enterprises, NGOs, and we think that also in our UCLG network, it's important to give opportunity to both urban and more rural perspectives. And the new urban agenda is also giving a lot of opportunities for that UN Habitat and UCLG are designing. So for the moment, this is my contribution. I wish you all the best and good luck. We have just finished our skating season here, our ice skating season. I made a small contribution on film from just besides the skating floor. And I wish you all the best.
Has been really, really cold in the Netherlands, and now you are starting to lose the ice that was there. Thank you for joining us, Mayor. We talked yesterday about the rural-urban symbiosis, which I think is very relevant for the work that we are doing. And tomorrow, during our day dedicated to nature, we will also certainly address that. Thank you, Mayor, for being with us, and groetjes to Opsterland. Thank you. So let us So let us now go to another colleague that is working with us from the Secretariat and dedicated to the Observatory on Participatory Democracy. Adria, I saw you somewhere. Yes, I know you are with us. What does this, what do you think that the contribution of the Observatory, who is dedicated to rethinking democracy, can be to this part of our work? And I would also like to ask Luz to get ready from Bogota, because she's made an interesting comment in the chat, and I would welcome her intervening as well. So Adria, please go ahead.
So thank you, Emilia, and hello, everyone. And thank you for this opportunity to sharing with you the main priorities of our Observatory in Participatory Democracy, and also a way to help in in building this pact for the future. So our two main priorities are now the ecological transition and the gender equality. So regarding the climate crisis, we want to focus on the role of participation, dialogue, and co-creation of civil society and governments in this ecological transition. We understand that we have to change the way of producing, consuming, moving, and ultimately how we live. So, and that must to be done in form of co-creation. No? So we think in practices such as participatory budgets, so as mentioned this morning by colleagues from the UCLG Africa, but also like citizens assembly with citizens selected by law, and all forms of dialogues, debates, etc., that can be used as drivers to transform the reality by putting people at the heart of this process. And also in terms of gender equality, so the idea is to think about the intersectional strategies of achieving full participation of women, both in position of responsibility, like the number of women elected officials, and also the role of women in civil society organization. And obviously, we will also continue to monitor other initiatives in terms of democratic quality. And let's think about this pact of future in terms of intergenerational dialogue, renewal of democracy, digital rights, and other human rights that have to be put in the center for this future. And finally, I take this opportunity to announce that the call for the IOPD award that you were talking before it is open. So we invite all the members of UCLG, all the local and regional governments to apply their innovative experiences in participation and in co-creation and in local democracy. So all these initiatives are being collected, and it's not just for the award, but it's also a way to collect all these experiences and sharing with local governments. And finally, I just want to mention also that the next month of August in 2021, this year, that will be our yearly conference that will be held in Côte d'Ivoire, in Cocody, but also will be in virtual mode. So we're also glad to invite you and to think together to build this process of thinking the future, also with putting democracy and human rights in the center.
Thank you very much, Adria, for those inputs. We really look forward to contributing to that important conference where the latest on democratization and direct democracy, but also participation, as Alice was saying, It's not an option, it's not a trade-off. Participatory democracy needs to be part and parcel of our new way of governing in many places and enhanced in those places where it has been done before. So thank you for bringing the voice of the observatory to the discussion. I see that we have with us as well Mariana Flores from the City of Mexico. If you agree, we will give the floor to Mariana first and then Luz. Mariana, peace, a very important part of our agenda. Peace understood from the day-to-day life of citizens. Welcome. El foro de las ciudades cuidadoras, siempre decíamos el foro de las ciudades en paz, de paz. No sabíamos cómo llamarle al principio, en la primera edición, y ahora México ha retomado esta apuesta con mucha fuerza y la ha vuelto a situar en el centro de la agenda de CGLU después de la pionera Madrid. Muchas gracias por estar con nosotros, Mariana. ¿Pensamientos sobre cómo puede contribuir el foro a esta parte del pacto?
Muchas gracias, Emilia, y qué gusto estar en un nuevo retiro con todos ustedes ahora de manera virtual, pero realmente nos han hecho sentir como en casa y nos han hecho sentir como que estamos ahí, como cada año, compartiendo cafés y risas con los colegas, así que felicidades por este trabajo y muchas gracias. Y sí, yo creo que ahora las ciudades, mientras seguimos luchando con los últimos picos de la pandemia y mientras estamos ya pensando estratégicamente en la recuperación económica, ambiental, de los sistemas de salud, hay un componente muy importante y creo que es el que hemos estado debatiendo hoy toda esta mañana, que es también la parte social, ¿no? El tejido social. Y entender cómo estas desigualdades que ya desde ayer hemos visto cómo se han profundizado son una de las causas principales para que exista la violencia en nuestras ciudades y territorios. Y es ahí, creo, donde este proceso del Foro Mundial sobre Ciudades y Territorios de Paz se vuelve relevante y que puede aportar mucho a este pacto de futuro. Desde el foro hemos reflexionado cómo los servicios públicos de calidad, un medio ambiente limpio, una movilidad integrada, no se trata de privilegios, son derechos. Entonces, esta perspectiva que hemos adoptado desde el foro es que los derechos son los que tienen que orientar la construcción de estas ciudades y territorios de paz. Entonces, a partir de esta prioridad que desde CGLU se ha establecido en estos valores, es que queremos trabajar el foro. Nosotros, como lo hemos venido diciendo, entendemos a este foro no como un evento, sino como un proceso. Y este proceso nos ha llevado ya durante varios meses a abrir un montón de espacios de reflexión, donde hemos dialogado sobre cómo fortalecer las estructuras de gobernanza, cómo garantizar derechos y cómo asegurarnos de que esa paz se instale en nuestros territorios, más ahora en este proceso de recuperación. Sabemos que va a ser complicado tener un encuentro presencial como el que habíamos imaginado hace un año, pero estamos seguros que esperemos hacia la segunda mitad del año, en octubre, podamos recibirlos en México para poder dialogar sobre las ciudades y territorios de paz. Y finalmente, otra cuestión que me parece muy importante y que va muy vinculada al espíritu propio de CGLU, es que este es un proceso de coconstrucción en el cual estamos más de 20 organizaciones, ciudades, CGLU por supuesto, redes, organismos internacionales, pensando juntos cómo construir esa paz. Entonces, nos parece que es un gran motivo de celebración poder compartir esto con ustedes porque sabemos que la narrativa que estamos construyendo desde el foro va a contribuir a este pacto de futuro y sabemos que este pacto de futuro va a nutrir nuestros debates en el foro. Así que muchas gracias.
Gracias, Mariana. Acuérdate que el año pasado en Marrakech nos preguntabas que de qué color veíamos la paz. Y era una pregunta que nos dejó a todos muy sorprendidos y yo me pregunto, quizás la tengamos que volver a hacer en algún momento del retiro para ver si ha evolucionado la respuesta. En aquel momento no éramos conscientes del espacio, del momento tan especial que íbamos a vivir, pero nos encanta que estés de nuevo con nosotros y que este proceso del foro acompañe nuestro trabajo. Luz Medina, directora de Relaciones Internacionales de la ciudad de Bogotá. Qué bueno tenerte con nosotros. Justo te conocí hace un año en Tánger. Bienvenida de nuevo, Luz. ¿Pensamientos sobre esta parte de la discusión?
Muchas gracias, Emilia. Muchas gracias a todo el equipo tuyo. Es increíble que nos hayan logrado organizar y juntar a pesar de las circunstancias en esta forma. Ha sido de verdad muy grato volverlos a ver, como decía Mariana. Creo que han acertado en el enfoque que le han dado a este bloque de discusión, pero también a buena parte del encuentro alrededor del tema del cuidado. Este es un tema que para Bogotá y para esta administración en particular es esencial, es de central importancia y creemos que es una nueva forma de aproximar los desafíos que tenemos por delante. Si ponemos el cuidado de los individuos en el centro de la discusión, es un muy buen articulador del enfoque de derechos y del enfoque de superación de las desigualdades que tenemos en este momento. Para Bogotá el concepto de cuidado está muy relacionado también con la carga que tradicionalmente se le ha puesto en los hombros de las mujeres a toda la carga de cuidado de los niños, de personas mayores y que ha redundado en una desigualdad en términos de oportunidades para las mujeres. Tiene un enfoque también de relevar a las mujeres de esa carga para mejorar su inserción en el mercado laboral, en el acceso a la educación, y creemos que ha sido también un enfoque muy acertado para responder a la pandemia, poniendo el cuidado de los ciudadanos en el centro de la discusión, proveyéndoles no solamente condiciones desde el sistema de salud pública, sino también desde justamente la cultura. Creemos que la cultura es un componente de cuidado esencial también, como lo decía en mi mensaje allí, de salud mental. Entonces, es un enfoque novedoso. Creemos que la humanidad tenemos que superar nuestras diferencias en aproximaciones ideológicas, en lo que se entiende como derechos en muchas partes del mundo. Si sabemos que el cuidado de las personas, de los individuos, está en el centro de cualquier tipo de respuesta. Así que los felicito por este enfoque y les agradezco muchísimo este espacio que además nos están ilustrando con unos elementos importantes desde lo que los ponentes están compartiendo con nosotros. Así que muchísimas gracias y bueno, nos seguiremos viendo esta semana.
Bueno, seguimos por aquí porque todavía nos falta una parte muy importante de esta sesión de hoy. Actually, we are about to go into the breakout sessions. You know, Amanda is going to summarize those breakout sessions for us. I've been asking in the chat whether someone else would like to intervene, and I don't see any hands. We don't have much time left, so it's not bad that we go to breakout sessions. Obviously, we will have opportunity to continue the exchange later this afternoon. We come back to plenary to see the results of those discussions. The breakout sessions are fast sessions, 30 minutes of really rich exchange. What do we have in petto, Amanda?
Donc, nous avons cet après-midi 5 sessions prévues dans un petit groupe. Une première qui sera sur migration et qui aura lieu dans cet espace-là de la plénière, donc sur le même lien. Et nous aurons ensuite une sur génération égalité, une autre sur migration, une autre qui sera sur droit numérique et la dernière sur accessibilité. L'ensemble des liens vont vous être communiqués dans le chat. Vous pouvez aussi les trouver sur le site de UCLG Meet. Donc, à vos marques, pré-partez pour 30 minutes de débat, d'échange, d'idées intéressantes. N'hésitez pas à vraiment prendre la parole et à participer activement dans ces 30 minutes qui seront dédiées au débat. Voilà, donc nous retrouvons chacun dans les groupes de sessions de travail et dans 30 minutes en plénière ici tous ensemble avec les retours et les idées de chacun. Voilà.
Yes, and if you think what I would prefer is to talk with colleagues that are here in the meeting, you can go and click on the Wonder app and go to our networking hub. It's open, it's available, it's there for you. You can have bilateral meetings, nobody listening in. You can meet other people. We've got many participants, so we don't think we will come short of participants of the breakout sessions. Use the links that have been shared for you, and we will see you here in 30 minutes. Talk to you soon again. And thank you, Amanda, for helping out now.
Bonne session à tous. Hi everyone, and welcome to those who have decided to stay in this session on synchronization on migration. And well, I am Fatima Fernandez, in charge of migration at the UCLG World Secretariat. And since we don't have much time, I will dive in straightforward into the subject. I think that some of you perhaps recall me from last year in a very different situation in Tangier, trying to convince you about the reasons why the time had come to synchronize our work plans, our priorities on migration. Back then, and if we can go to the next slide, back then I spent like almost 15 minutes explaining you a really long list of events, charters, spaces, partners that had been key in our journey from the launch of the Wave of Action on Migration in 2016 up until then, up until that moment where migration was very high on our priorities. Well, luckily enough, today I won't be doing that again. Indeed, I am coming here with just two pieces of good news. The first one is that despite the whole circumstance, we do think that synchronization is happening. We do feel it here in the World Secretariat. I feel it in my work because I have been working with all the parts of the session, the network, and with very different partners for this year in fruitful conversations, but also I think it is felt also in global processes. Our voices are more and more coherent and of course are more and more listened to. So this is the first part, and for the first part I want to say thanks to all the parts of the network that have been so involved in making this a reality. And secondly, I think that we all have to celebrate that in this circumstance the UCLG family kept growing. And indeed, last year, we welcomed our dear member from Lampedusa, Salvatore Martello, and if we can go now to the next slide. Major Martello, we met him at the Global Forum for Migration and Development, and from the very beginning, we started a discussion on his willingness and ambition to shift the narrative on migration from his reality at the heart of the Mediterranean. At our World Council in Guangzhou, and also as part of the Policy Council on the Route to the City, which has met just last week, we heard him expressing his willingness to come up with a charter, but he doesn't want a charter. He wants a process of co-creation where we go beyond a seat at the table and we speak about human mobility by speaking of human rights, by speaking of communities, by speaking of dignity, speaking of peace, speaking of collective memory. So what I'm bringing today to you is a proposal to start to brainstorm of this process. And happily enough, I am not alone in this. Let us just go to my last slide before I introduce our first guest. just with a snapshot on what we think we should be looking at when starting this process, and when looking also at how will human mobility fit our Pact for the People, also listening and taking very much into account what we have just heard in the former plenary. We think that there's no process of co-creation without building on our local experiences, leveraging on our diversity, and we really want all the parts of the network engaged and contributing. And with that process, we will have a charter that reflects our shared values, our commitments, but also our requests, and also what we oppose, and all in all, strengthening our global voice. So allow me now to invite to this virtual floor to my dearest colleague, Antonello Ravetto, spokesperson of the Mayor of Lampedusa, who will lead us through the charter. Yeah, I mean, colleagues, we will for sure invite Mayor Josep Mayoral later, because I think he has much to say in this conversation about peace and migration. But before, we will go with our colleague Antonello, which will explain us a little bit more of the vision of Lampedusa, and how do you envisage this process. So Antonello, the floor is yours. This is the network, and you have 5 minutes for your presentation.
¿Me escuchan ahora? Perfecto. Hola a todos, gracias y gracias a todo el equipo de UCLG, a la secretaria Saiz y a Emilia Saiz y a Fátima por toda la organización de este encuentro. Fátima, sabes, cada vez que hablo en una reunión de UCLG, digo siempre disculpas si mi español no es muy bien, pero espero que me vas a entender. Soy Antonello Ravetto Antinori, soy periodista, hago una pequeña presentación, soy periodista y trabajo con el alcalde de Lampedusa, Totò Martello. Lampedusa, desde un año más o menos, empezó a trabajar juntos con UCLG y descubriendo, encontrando muchas oportunidades de confronto y para crecer como experiencia de administración y de municipalidad, y también espera que de poner la experiencia de Lampedusa para hacer crecer el percurso de UCLG, especialmente en respecto al tema de los migrantes y al respecto de los derechos humanos. Especialmente en este lado del mundo, Lampedusa es conocida como un símbolo de acogida, porque es la puerta de la Europa, es la isla más al sur de la Europa, donde llegan la mayor parte de los migrantes desde el África. Entonces, el alcalde Salvatore Martello, a la reunión del Consejo Político de la pasada semana, habló de lo que puede ser una carta, llamamos la Carta de Lampedusa, pero ahora es un papel que necesita de conceptos, de contenidos, de valores. Lo que podemos decir en respecto a la experiencia de Lampedusa es que principalmente los flujos de los migrantes es un percorso muy largo. Lo que pasa por Lampedusa, por ejemplo, es la parte de la primera acogida, pero hay muchos otros aspectos que se pueden incluir en este tema, y por esto necesitamos el contributo de cada uno de vos por hacer una carta que puede ser realmente llena de valores y de contenidos. Por ejemplo, el alcalde Martello habló de la importancia de reconocer y defender los derechos humanos de cada persona, promover mecanismos de acogida y integración que pueden al mismo tiempo sostener las comunidades locales, especialmente en el territorios de confines. También es necesario pensar y recordar de la necesidad de parar todas las violaciones humanitarias, y como por ejemplo la injusta, no justa detenciones, y especialmente respecto a lo que pasa por las mujeres y los niños. Habló también del concepto de solidaridad y de la importancia de hacer acciones de cooperación internacional, especialmente con los países de origen de los flujos de migrantes. Naturalmente, todo esto se pone en un discurso que tiene siempre que mirar a garantir otras cosas, todos los derechos fundamentales, y como también la posibilidad de acceso a los servicios de las municipalidades y a la digitalización. Esta carta se podría poner para seguir un percurso que ya UCLG y todas las organizaciones que trabajan con él hicieron en los años pasados, y también se podría poner en un contexto que mira a la Agenda 2030 y a los principios del Global Compact for Migration de las Naciones Unidas. Otra cosa también es respecto a lo al tema de la reunión de antes, el valor de la cultura y de la memoria colectiva es un tema que en Lampedusa es muy importante, porque sin memoria, sin saber lo que pasó, no se puede construir un futuro mejor. Y también otro tema muy fuerte en la experiencia de Lampedusa y del alcalde es el tema de la correcta narración, de la correcta comunicación que pasa por los periódicos, los medios y especialmente por los social networks. Pienso a la cantidad de fake news y del fenómeno del hate speech que pasa por Facebook o por los social networks, y todo esto es parte de un percurso completo que esperamos puede portar a hacer un documento, un manifiesto de valores, una carta que pero tiene lo que con los valores y los principios que he dicho, pero necesitamos el contributo de cada uno de ustedes.
Creo que como primer ejercicio de visión y sobre todo para abrir el debate, nos has dado muchos elementos esenciales, y yo creo que hay uno que has mencionado tú ahora y que el alcalde Martel lo menciona de manera continua y que para él está en la base de su trabajo en la cuestión migratoria, que es el concepto de la paz. Claro. Y en este sentido, creo que es muy relevante que lo hayas mencionado de nuevo. Tenemos la suerte de contar en esta sesión con el alcalde Josep Mayoral de Granollers, que es también presidente de las Ciudades para la Paz en Europa. Y a mí me gustaría mucho saber qué piensa el alcalde de esta propuesta, de esta iniciativa, de cómo se vincula la cuestión de la movilidad humana y de la dignidad a esa cuestión más amplia de la paz, y cómo ve a estos elementos alimentando el pacto para el futuro. Alcalde, ¿lo tenemos con nosotros?
Sí, estoy aquí, sí.
Perfecto. Muchísimas gracias.
Buenas tardes. Bueno, en primer lugar, gracias por hacer una cosa muy importante en estos momentos, ¿no? Estamos tan encerrados en nuestro mundo, estamos con la mirada tan puesta en los problemas cotidianos que corremos el riesgo de quedar atrapados en nuestro entorno, ¿no? CGLU, como siempre, invita a alzar la mirada, a diseñar objetivos de futuro, a no renunciar a nada de lo que es nuestra esencia, nuestras vocaciones, nuestra voluntad de trabajo. Esta idea central de construir ciudades que sean más resilientes, ciudades que sean más humanas, ciudades que trabajen por la dignidad. Por tanto, gracias por de nuevo en este retreat poner estos argumentos encima de la mesa. Evidentemente, sin dignidad no hay paz. La lucha por la paz es la lucha por la dignidad de las personas. Lampedusa lo sabe mejor que nadie. El mar Mediterráneo se ha convertido hoy en un gran cementerio, ¿no? Gente que muere simplemente por buscar dignidad, huyendo de conflictos militares televisados como los de Siria, pero también de conflictos más pequeños que están silenciados, que el mundo olvida, que el mundo no mira. Y en estos momentos en los que los estados miran para cierto lado, que los estados callan, es imprescindible que las ciudades pongamos la voz. Que las ciudades, hablando con nuestros vecinos, con nuestras vecinas, seamos capaces de articular discursos, un discurso basado, como decía, en la dignidad, en las puertas abiertas y en la capacidad de entender que Senegal está en la esquina, al lado de mi casa y no muy lejos, ¿no? En la visión esta de un mundo global en el que o buscamos estas alianzas en la que todos trabajemos conjuntamente o bien no hay futuro. Se trata de trabajar por la paz, se trata de trabajar por la lucha contra las desigualdades. Nuestros ODS lo dicen con toda claridad. Se trata de trabajar para que nadie quede atrás. Y esto no tiene fronteras y seguramente solamente es posible si las ciudades somos capaces de crear una gran red que vaya mucho más allá de las líneas que nos separan. Los estados son líneas que nos separan. Las ciudades son voluntades que reúnen a mucha gente para construir este futuro a partir de la proximidad. Necesitamos ciudades que tengan muy claro que desde la proximidad se puede construir un mundo mejor, que es desde la plaza de nuestros pueblos que debemos establecer estos vínculos que nos permitan abrir nuevas perspectivas. Por tanto, a la de Lampedusa, trabajemos juntos para que nadie quede atrás.
Gracias, alcalde. De su intervención recojo sobre todo las palabras que me parecen tan relevantes, que sin dignidad no hay paz. And speaking of dignity, indeed, among the efforts we've done this year to go farther in our advocacy for a migration that works for all, we've been strengthening our ties with key partners like OSF, with which we have organized, for instance, a dialogue within the framework of the UN 75 dialogues. That was difficult for local governments, but local governments were there, and we were there with them. We were there with the mayor of Lampedusa and with some members from UCLG Africa. We have today Colleen Tues with us from the migration program of the Open Society Foundation. And I would like to know from you, what are your first thoughts on this proposal, and how do you envisage this work of local governments toward a shift in the narrative and a different path for the future?
Thank you very much. Buenas tardes, bonne soirée, and hello. Thank you very much for this invitation, honorable mayors, colleagues and friends. I've had the opportunity to study the Lampedusa Charter earlier today, and I'm speaking in my own capacity as somebody who has supported the work of cities and local governments more widely, so that they may do the type of work that Lampedusa and others are doing on behalf of all of us and on behalf of humanity. From my point of view, and certainly in the work of many of our partners, including the Mayor's Migration Council, our partnership with UCLG and others, we see it as extremely important to continue to put actions behind the spirit of solidarity of places like Lampedusa and others in the work that they are doing. And those actions fall in two broad categories. One of them is making sure opening all channels, political channels, so that cities and local governments, communities that are doing the work have access, meaningful access to participating in the decisions that are made nationally, interregionally, globally, that have an impact on migration and refugee policy. The most exciting recent achievement by cities, as far as I can tell, is Objective 15 of the Global Compact on Migration, where we know now that this, what will likely become a norm of international law, as I see it, that of non-discriminatory access to essential services, is something that found its way into that text, thanks to the advocacy of communities and cities coming together and making sure that that principle finds itself in a document that is to guide states in the actions and the policies that they establish in their own countries. When we think that the negotiations and the achievement of that non-discriminatory access norm within that international agreement happened 2 years before the pandemic COVID-19 was before us, when cities knew that to discriminate in matters of public health, public education, other essential services based on the legal status of an individual in that city, town, or municipality makes no sense for humanity, and makes no sense when it comes to keeping that community healthy and safe, productive, and resilient. So this is one example of why it is so important and continues to be so important to make sure that local governments have the type of access to meaningful participation in the decisions and the policies that are being established by national governments and between national governments. The other area of work that is equally important is to make sure that cities have not just more funding for the work that they do in welcoming and including migrants and refugees in the short term and in the longer term, but really understanding how we can change the international system such that cities have more sustainable access to financing for the work that they do. There should be opportunities for cities, towns, municipalities, and communities to be able to finance the work that they do in emergency and in longer term inclusion, just as they're beginning to have in other large projects, be it infrastructure or otherwise. We've heard for many years now that cities and towns, communities are on the front line of inclusion and integration, and the international community and the international system of financial institutions and others should be supporting cities in this work. And I'm very encouraged, as are many of the advocates involved in the recent launch of the International Municipal Investment Fund by UCLG and by UNCDF and by others. We see this as a model that should be replicated. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Colleen. Thanks a lot. And thanks a lot also for reminding us of all the achievements we've done. There's much to be done yet, but it was indeed very refreshing to see, for instance, the UN Secretary General highlighting its midterm report to the Global Compact on how local governments had already realized before states acknowledged it, that universal access to basic services was cornerstone. So, I mean, step by step, and together with our partners and with different parts of our network, we are trying to make it, and we are very happy to do this also with you. And now I cannot leave this session without going to a city that is also at the bottom of my heart, and also to my ground laboratory of intervention. En Méditerranée, avant d'avoir Lampedusa avec nous, On a pas mal travaillé avec nos collègues de plusieurs villes qui sont impliquées dans le projet Migration ville à ville en Méditerranée. C'est par là que je suis rentrée dans l'univers CGLU et je suis très contente de voir avec nous aujourd'hui M. Mohamed Wajdi, le adjoint au maire de la ville de Sfax. Et je voudrais savoir qu'est-ce que vous en pensez en tant que aussi conseillère du Conseil politique du droit à la ville. Et après vous, je reviendrai vers Antonello et on reviendra à la session principale. Si Wajdi, qu'est-ce que vous en pensez de tout ça?
Vraiment merci Fatima, je suis très ravi d'être avec vous et parmi vous face à mon collègue de la municipalité de Lampedusa, parce que s'il n'y a pas de relation vraiment officielle entre nos deux villes, mais en réalité, il y en a à travers la migration malheureusement clandestine des migrants qui font le départ de nos littorales envers le nord. Vraiment, c'est fantastique d'être avec vous, parmi vous, dans un contexte très compliqué. Je suis très content et j'apprends des expériences des autres. Je suis solidaire et je suis partant avec la municipalité de Lampedusa. J'ai bien consulté la feuille de route que propose cette ville et monsieur le maire de Lampedusa et je suis très content et je suis partant, je suis solidaire et on va travailler ensemble, que ce soit au niveau du projet MC2CM ou au niveau du conseil politique ou de ce contexte de famille de CGLU. Je suis très ravi, je suis très content. On est dans un contexte très difficile localement en Tunisie, au niveau national et au niveau international avec le Covid, mais on est très satisfait et on est très motivé pour le bien des migrants et des hommes et des femmes et des enfants qui étaient poussés de partir et venir vers nos villes. Et c'est fantastique cette rencontre-là et de travailler avec ces hommes et ces femmes pour le bien des migrants et de l'humanité. Merci, je vous en remercie beaucoup.
Merci à vous aussi, Wajdi. C'est toujours un plaisir de pouvoir continuer à travailler avec vous. We have just 4 minutes left, so I would say that if anyone has any further comment to share with us, feel free to do it. You can also do it through the chat. And in any case, you can always visit the mural and all the devices we offer to you to propose also and share your thoughts and resources and so on. But I want to go back to Antonello and ask him, Antonello, che cosa ne porti da questa sessione? What do you think about this session, about what you have heard? What do you bring to the major today?
Ok, ¿me escuchas? Sí, perfecto. Otra vez, muchas gracias a a toda la gente que está aquí y que contribuisce alla construcción de este percurso. Yo creo, escuché en particular algunas palabras llave, se dice así creo, que creo que es la manera muy útil y para escribir materialmente esta carta. Por ejemplo, el síndaco Joseph Mayoral habló del concepto de sin dignidad no hay paz. Son dos palabras, dignidad y paz, que están en el centro del percurso que estamos haciendo. También la colega de Open Society habló de la importancia de hacer también un proceso político, porque es un aspecto fundamental de este percurso. Y el alcalde de Sfax, me acuerdo que habló también a la reunión del Consejo Político de la otra semana, y saber que estamos acá hoy en una reunión donde están Lampedusa y la ciudad de la Tunisia, Sfax, que son los protagonistas de la narración, los principales protagonistas de la narración del fenómeno migratorio que interesa a Lampedusa. Creo que hacer esta unión es ya un traguardo, como se dice, un objetivo que habemos raggiunto. ¿Qué más? Creo que
Te voy a
se
parar
puede...
porque vamos a tener más tiempo para llevar esto a la sesión principal.
Nadie más. Gracias a todos.
Tampoco hay que ser tan... Bueno, ni tan aquí ni tan allá. Anyway, I just, sorry to interrupt you, but I really wanted also to highlight, there's a comment in the chat by Luz Amparo Medina from Bogotá, reminding that the discussion needs to transcend the Mediterranean, and we certainly think you're right, and we certainly want this to go beyond the borders of the Mediterranean. So we are now about to close. I don't know if colleagues, we have one more minute, so I don't think so, right? Anyway, this conversation has just started, so feel free. Yeah, so just, we need to close, but this conversation has just started, and we will be listening to you, and this process is for all of us, is for the whole network and for all the constituents. So let me close here, and we will go back to the main plenary to share and hear from the rest of colleagues.
Muchas gracias, Fátima. Colleagues, this is like when you are in a lobby of the hotel and you're still having your last cup of coffee before going back to plenary. We are still waiting for some people to arrive from the other sessions. We want to take the opportunity to watch the full video of the special rapporteur, Mr. Fakhri. Let's have a look.
Hello, my name is Michael Fakhri, and I am the United Nations Special Rapporteur on the Right to Food. This means that the UN has authorized me to be the leading authority on the right to food. I'm sorry that I cannot speak to you live today, but due to the pandemic and time zone differences, I have to provide this video instead. I do wish that I could have joined you for your annual retreat because I believe that cities and local governments are key global players in making people's everyday life better. I presented some of my views on how to tackle COVID-19 in my latest report to the UN Human Rights Council, which you can find online. Governments are trying to strike a balance between health and wealth. If they attend to people's health by locking everything down, they bring the economy to a halt and destroy people's livelihoods. If they prioritize the economy and emphasize production and growth, then a large number of people will continue to get sick, become weak, or die. A common way to frame the issue has been in terms of trade-offs. As infection rates decrease, governments can open up the economy more. But when the pandemic worsens, governments impose safety measures that may slow down economic productivity. But thinking in terms of trade-offs has analytical limitations. It pits health against livelihoods. It assumes that by focusing more on people's health, there is inevitably an economic cost, and vice versa. That way of thinking has been reactive and has not tackled the inherent inequities that are making the effects of the pandemic brutal and prolonged. However, I found that it is useful to frame the COVID-19 pandemic as a crisis of care. If you frame the pandemic as a crisis of care, then you can start identifying priorities and tackling the problems underlying the pandemic's effects. If thinking in terms of trade-offs frames things as different compromises and sacrifices, thinking in terms of care frames the issue as a matter of sequencing and helps determine who should be protected first in order to make everyone else better and stronger. As people are getting sick and dying during the pandemic, people, and mostly women, are having to work harder and longer to ensure everyone stays healthy and alive. Care is not just about attending directly to people's emotional and physical needs. It includes all activities that nourish and nurture, all the elements that are necessary for people's welfare and for them to flourish. Framed in this way, care captures three elements. One, the needs of individuals in vulnerable situations. Two, the social capacity to care through institutions. And three, the needs of people who are care workers and are essential for humanity's well-being. I offer my services to you and hope to find ways to collaborate with United Cities and local governments. I wish you all the best for your retreat.
Well, thank you very much for these inputs, I would say, Special Rapporteur Factory. And I would like to call on Alex. Alex, I just wrote you in the chat saying that you would be up next because I wanted you to react to this notion. We said that trade-offs were not the way to go, but I wanted to check with you whether you think this approach of the crisis of care and the pathways that we are trying to construct are two roads that meet, and whether we could approach it also together. What is your sense of this, Alex?
Yeah, I totally see those connections, and yeah, I still think that from what was discussed, that there are non-negotiable aspects that we cannot really think in those terms, and putting the question in those ways also undermines our ingenuity, our creativity to deal with complex problems and to try to address them. And I think definitely care is one of those incredible kind of ways of looking at things that allows us to think not only in terms of how we care for each other, but how can territories and can also be caring in the way that we design them, the way we plan them. So we can start thinking of the spaces within our communities and the spaces within our cities that could be more inclusive, more caring, and they could be used in a more equitable way. And this is a way of thinking about care as well. So thinking of nature, about territories, and people all in an interconnected way. And by the way, you know, have many other perspectives have already been thinking in these ways. If you look at Bien Vivir in Latin America, these are kind of ways of seeing the world that has already been around, that we can definitely draw on them to make sure that those connections are highlighted and when we work through them, rather than approach them as trade-offs, which I think it was a great point made by the rapporteur.
Thank you so much, Alex, for those inputs. We are ready now to listen to the feedback from the breakout sessions. I understand we are going to start with migration, and our colleague from Lampedusa, Antonello, is going to be providing very, very quickly in a few minutes, Antonello, what have been the main results of these breakout sessions. And then Amanda, we will go in order. You do one, I do one. Antonello, to you.
Hola, buenas de nuevo. Espero de ser muy rápido. Fue una reunión muy importante porque hablé de la idea del alcalde de Lampedusa, Totò Martello, de proseguir el percurso de UCLG en tema de migrantes y de respecto de los derechos humanos, creando una carta de Lampedusa donde poner valores comunes y objetivos comunes. Creo que la manera mejor es trabajar esta carta con palabras llaves y conceptos fuertes que pueden dar también como se dice, sentimiento a este documento. Una cosa importante que quiero decir a todos es que la idea es de escribir una carta donde poner los valores de UCLG y la experiencia de Lampedusa, claro, pero se llama Carta de Lampedusa, pero es necesario que tiene conceptos de toda la comunidad, de todos los socios de UCLG que tiene algo de decir para contribuir a este percurso. Se llama Carta de Lampedusa, pero tiene que ser una carta que vale también por Buenos Aires, por la periferia de Madrid o por el centro de Valencia, de todas las ciudades. Tienen que reconocerse en este documento. Esto es la esperanza que tiene Lampedusa y creo que tiene también UCLG. Poder hacer un manifiesto que habla realmente y concretamente en los temas, respecto al tema de los migrantes y de los derechos humanos.
Gracias, Antonello. Creo que es parte de lo que también hablaba Luz Medina en vuestra sesión, que teníamos que tener en cuenta no solo esta parte que hemos trabajado más efectivamente mediterránea, pero también todo el aspecto de migración. Está en el espíritu de CGLU y creo que está en el espíritu de Lampedusa. O sea que os agradecemos mucho, amigos de Lampedusa, por traernos este regalo, la carta de Lampedusa que vamos a ir co-construyendo. Muchas gracias, Antonello.
¿Puedo decir solo una cosa más pequeña?
Una cosa,
velocísima, solo para decir, todo lo que hacemos acá, también en Lampedusa, serve a realizar algo. Exactamente hoy, es una casualidad, en Lampedusa presentamos un proyecto para realizar en una cantera, se dice creo, de la isla, un teatro abierto al público y un mausoleo de los migrantes. Esto para decir como cuando se habla de la importancia de los derechos a la cultura y de la necesidad, me hablaba antes desde Buenos Aires, Enrique, he dicho que la cultura tiene que ser un espacio público. Exactamente, en Lampedusa, exactamente hoy se presentó este proyecto para realizar un teatro natural abierto al público donde hay cultura y memoria, recuerdo de los migrantes. Gracias también al percurso de UCLG.
Muchas gracias, Antonello. Merecía la pena darte esos segunditos más por traernos esto. A ver, el trabajo que se hace desde los gobiernos locales no es un trabajo que puedas meter en unas cajas y en sectores. Nosotros artificialmente intentamos hacer estas divisiones para facilitar la discusión, pero sabemos que está todo ligado. Yo ahora corro para darle la palabra a la siguiente sesión, al informe de la siguiente sesión. No sé cuál es, Amanda. À ti.
Donc, on va continuer ensuite avec le rapporteur sur la session d'accessibilité. Donc, je vais inviter Federico à nous partager ce qui a été le cœur de la session. Peut-être simplement aussi 2 mots parce que j'ai participé à la session sur la migration, rappeler à quel point, en entendant les discussions, on sent que les pouvoirs locaux sont acteurs des droits. Ils ne viennent pas d'une page blanche, ils ont des expériences à proposer et à quel point nous avons besoin des outils à créer ensemble pour pouvoir faire front à ces défis communs. Et je crois que c'était une expérience assez forte. Et on va continuer avec ce fil conducteur des droits sur la question d'accessibilité. Federico, à toi la parole.
Thank you, Amanda. Yeah, so in our session, it was nice because we also had the regional perspective from some of the representatives, but we really looked into this point on learning. So going from not only the policy making, but also the policy implementation and discussing how we can really scale up inclusion and accessibility in our cities. The representatives talked about, for example, with VNG International, who's working on a 5-year disability inclusion program, which is quite interesting, that looks not only at scaling up initiatives with Dutch municipalities, but also making connections with other African municipalities. So that kind of cross connection, which is really interesting in fostering those best practices, and how the learning could really help in the work that they're doing around this 5-year strategy, and kind of also connecting what the work that's already being done into the sharing of best practices. And a lot also came into the aspect of how we're looking at the transformation after the pandemic. So we've been seeing so many changes, and also the data really showing how many people that were left behind, that got further marginalized during the pandemic, and how we can use this moment, the data that we're learning, the shared practices, to really scale up that transformation. And the colleague from Congope said really that looking at accessibility as a key driver to that transformation. So how do we work up in this kind of scaled up approaches? And another aspect of needing that learning is to really not only understand what is the issue and what we can do, but also how. I think that's the answering that we were coming up with, is how we do that. And we also had the aspect of where accessibility and this kind of social accessibility also comes into economic opportunities, with Xi'an supporting organizations of persons with disabilities in their city for access to economic opportunities that are also part of the cultural framework of the city. So it really looked at that, you know, how can we, what are we doing now? How can we understand the policies that are needed, and then take that understanding into actual implementation through these learnings. And we're really proud to share during that session the work that we are doing with World Enabled on developing those modules, which there are already 3 available. And we're co-creating the further 4 of these modules, and really looking up at that, scaling up and putting that in. So time's up for me. Thank you so much.
Yes, it is up. Federico, thank you so much. And I feel more free when I address my team. Thank you, Federico, working also at the World Secretariat, very attached to this topic, a very important topic for us. Thank you for those inputs from so many different parts of the world. We will hear more about this work of co-creation that we are doing around learning and accessibility. Thank you so much. I understand that we are now going to the development cooperation session that was powered by our permanent working group, the CIB, that you all know. And I understand I have a duo coming in, that I have Saba Aslam, researcher of the Institute of Development Studies in the UK. And I also have our colleague Stan from the Dutch Association of Municipalities. Let's go.
Thank you so. Yeah, are you Stan? Are you going to go first?
No, you can start as Saba. That's okay. Then I will.
All right.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the introduction. I'm Saba Aslam, part of the research team that the UCLG has commissioned, part of the Institute of Development Studies, and working with Dr. Jaideep Gupte on this research on local governments and development cooperation. We had a really interesting session at the CIB retreat where we shared a couple of themes that this research will help understand. So I'll just give like a quick recap in terms of what points were discussed in the context of this being the last decade to achieve the Agenda 2030, and how the agenda of local cooperation can move forward. So a couple of points that were discussed, I looked at mitigation and adaptation to climate change. And this is a global crisis where many cities and local governments should recognize the risks faced by cities, and in those cities by least resourced and marginalized urban residents. We're very keen to hear from the group about how health systems work, particularly in the context of humanitarian crisis, and how health systems respond. And this is particularly key now where COVID has hit cities and economies globally. So we're keen to understand how COVID-19 and its impacts change the policymaking landscape. And then we would want to hear more from the group about how cities are responding and how their networks are working across to understand COVID-19 responses. And then very rightly raised about co-creation and co-production, and how capacities can be strengthened at the local government level, and how research can basically help enhance capacity for more innovation building, and what can be the possible mechanisms for cooperation, and how particularly South-South cooperation can actually help us achieve goals in this Agenda 2030, and being very mindful about what kind of new relationships could emerge between donor and recipients, what are the key actors, local actors who are at the front lines, and could potentially be help us understand new modes of development cooperation. And then finally about understanding how complex systems and thinking work at the local level. And so we're very keen to hear from, all right, I'm sorry I'm over time, but thanks so much.
And I still need to give the floor to Stan. So thank you very much for that.
All right.
Stan, your turn.
Thank you, Emilia, and thank you also, Saba. It was a really interesting session, so there's so much to tell about it. No, I just really briefly wanted to touch upon a bit of the alignment, I would say, of this interesting study and research, which will lead to a policy paper later this year, but will also be one of the building blocks for a policy statement at the Executive Bureau in April, May. So I think it fits and aligns perfectly with the overall agenda of the family, I would say, of which many of the priorities were discussed already during the inspiring opening. So exciting to happen also within the UCLG working group, UCLG CIB working group, and we're looking forward to engage with everyone on this interesting assignment. Thank you.
And I'm sorry for cutting you short. I mean, you know, time is like that, but just all of you, we need to think about these exchanges that we're having this week as just initial embryos to continue in a more integrated manner the work that we are doing together. So and if you propose a specific cities are listening session on these topics, we will give ourselves more time to discuss this. So thank you very much, very interesting inputs, and thank you CIB for powering this. Amanda.
Emilia, let's go next with our next breakout session on generation equality. I would like to invite Mrs. Flavia Tello on behalf of Anna Falou, our booth advisor. If you could share please with us the outputs of the session. Please, the floor is yours.
Sí. Muy buenos días, buenas tardes para todas las personas presentes. Voy a hablar en nombre de Anna Falou, la Ubuntu de género de CGLU, quien en estos momentos no puede hablar porque se está recuperando de una cirugía, pero sí compartir con ustedes las reflexiones de la sesión que estuvo trabajando hace unos minutos en este tema. Este año CGLU promoverá la fuerza y la potencia del feminismo municipalista y las experiencias de nuestras líderes, incluyendo la reunión de la Comisión del Estatus de las Mujeres, 6W65 y los foros Generación Igualdad de México y París. Es el momento de reunir a las líderes locales y regionales feministas para terminar con las violencias basadas en género, con la baja representación de las mujeres en los espacios políticos y públicos, atender a este derecho de cuidar, pero también de ser cuidadas, y asegurar la participación económica, así como las políticas fiscales pensadas en clave feminista. Los gobiernos locales tienen la mesa servida para nuevos reconocimientos y liderazgos a nivel internacional, que el mismo es aún más exigido en el actual contexto de la pandemia por COVID-19. Lo cierto y lo innegable también es que las mujeres han ido conquistando y ocupando cada vez más espacios y ampliando los bordes de las democracias y el desarrollo en el mundo. Sin embargo, aún estamos lejos de la paridad de género en la representación y la debida inclusión de género en las agendas. Por ello, CGLU, a 25 años de la Declaración y Plataforma de Acción de Beijing, y en el marco de la Agenda 2030 para los Objetivos de Desarrollo Sostenible, vamos a revisar el cumplimiento de los consensos alcanzados por los gobiernos locales y nos interesan en particular conocer cómo están respondiendo los gobiernos y sus líderes a estos compromisos. Desde CGLU, en esta agenda comprometida con las mujeres, con los derechos de las mujeres, con la paridad y la igualdad de género y con el liderazgo de su secretaria general, Emilia Sáez, como equipo de género liderado por Anna Falou, queremos llegar a México y a París con un reconocimiento a las experiencias de los gobiernos locales y las mujeres líderes políticas de todo el mundo. ¿Por qué? Porque la comunidad internacional se ha comprometido con el ODS 5 para asegurar la igualdad de género y es imperativo entonces acelerar los esfuerzos, que es un llamado que alcanza a los gobiernos locales y sus líderes. Por tanto, estamos trabajando, estamos reflexionando sobre esto, sobre qué significa esto del municipalismo feminista, y a partir de este grupo de trabajo esperamos llegar con un documento, una sistematización de las buenas prácticas, de las prácticas promisorias que están desarrollando los gobiernos locales del mundo, haciendo un reconocimiento especial a esas nuevas agendas, a esos nuevos discursos y esos nuevos llamados que traen las líderes feministas de los gobiernos municipales. La invitación es, por tanto, a que nos compartan esas experiencias que esperamos poder relevar y que nos ayuden a llegar con esta aproximación a lo que entendemos por el municipalismo feminista, que es esta gran agenda que nos está proponiendo CGLU. Muchas gracias.
Muchísimas gracias y un beso así de grande, no solo para ti, sino también para las compañeras de UN Women que estaban con nosotros, Patricia, también para Ana Falú. Estuve un ratito en el breakout session y es la primera vez ever que la he visto sin hablar. Ana, te queremos mucho, gracias por acompañarnos en este trabajo. Es una agenda muy política esta, la que estamos desarrollando, en la que estamos engordando mucho nuestra presencia internacional y creo que también abriendo espacios nuevos. En las próximas semanas y meses llega CSW y vamos a tener una agenda muy fuerte. Me he permitido la licencia de deciros esto porque creo que many of you that are really interested in our part in generation equality will need to follow us closely because there are important weeks coming up. And now I am going to digital rights, and we've got Máximo with us. Oh, I see Ana over there. Ana, te queremos mucho, mil gracias. Massimo is going to do the reporting on the session on digitalization and digital rights. Massimo, thank you for joining from upstairs again. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Emilia. Hello, everyone. Hello again. Well, very quickly on the digital rights breakout session, the general idea was, well, to discuss synchronization on the issue because it might be an issue that is not fully developed in all parts of the world, or maybe it's seen in different aspects. So it was a conversation on coming to a common understanding, on seeing the work throughout the different areas. And we heard not only from local and regional government representatives, but also from civil society and from the aspect of people forward digital rights. We heard from the Coalition of Cities for Digital Rights in Amsterdam, and from the governance perspective, we heard from Bilbao and Bogota went into the privacy aspect. So different axes of one general idea of digital rights. Instead, from civil society, we heard interesting comments that would bring me then to, let's say, our key takeaway from this session, which is related to the Pact to the Future, that there was a common understanding that we would see the Pact as being a connector between digital rights and the rest of the topics that we work on in our organization. So digital rights and mobility, digital rights and gender. So this is something that we all agreed that would be interesting to look at moving forward. I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Massimo. Thank you for keeping the time as well, although this is such an important topic for us, and it was great to have Amsterdam with us. As a matter of fact, we have the Vice Mayor of Barcelona talking today to you and DESA about digital rights as well, and that is also very much part and parcel of the work that UCLG does, amplifying the voices everywhere, and we're very happy that Barcelona carries that torch for us and for the whole municipal movement. The reason why she was not with us, but I think it's still worth it, that she was raising the flag of cities at the UN. And this is it. Amanda, for the breakout sessions. I hope everybody found it useful. Which one were you in?
I was on the one of migration. Thank you all for the very inspiring ideas. We can see like there is a very good synergies between the different initiatives and this idea, this willing to be together on that, no, and build like a common front. So it's very encouraging.
Yeah, we were doubting whether we could do something, you know, only 30 minutes, but I think we are becoming really efficient in the use of the time, that we want to give voices to more and more people, that we want to give you the opportunity to participate in dynamic environments. And talking about dynamism, we are going now to a video from the mayor of Izmir, our Mayor Sawyer, a mayor not only of people, but also of nature, that is going to be hosting the culture summit in his beautiful city. And after that, we're going to some music, and then we will be back for our session on advocating with UCLG, and that session starts at around 4:45. So please stick with us, be with us. We still have many interesting things ahead. Mayor Sawyer, the floor is yours.
Hello, everyone. We are so happy that Izmir hosts the UCLG Culture Summit 2021. On 10th of June, we will launch the summit with digital meetings. Thanks to very promising vaccines against COVID-19, I'm very positive that we will meet physically in Izmir between 9th and 11th of September. Izmir is one of the largest port cities in the Mediterranean with 4.5 million inhabitants. For hundreds of years, the goods traded through the Silk Road have been sent to European and North African countries from Izmir. The city has become the point where Eastern and Western cultures mingle and live together in harmony. In Izmir Culture Summit, we would like to discuss post-pandemic and the future we would like to create. In this respect, we will work in the line with the Rome Charter, which promote the right to participate in cultural life as a condition for a better society. In the summit, we will work together to connect culture and sustainable development. We will exchange on cultural policies, heritage, creativity, diversity, and local sustainable development. We will promote culture as core component of global solidarity. We will invest together in cultural policies at the summit. We will provide our societies with the tools for dialogue, coexistence, and freedom. This exchange requires your experiences, expertise, and the active representation of your communities in the summit. We will work to make cities more active in national and local levels to implement the Agenda 2030 and the SDGs. We invite local authorities, cultural sector institutions, practitioners, experts, scholars to Izmir Summit. We will strengthen our response to our common challenges. I invite you all to Izmir in September to participate in the UCLG Culture Summit.
Thank you very much, Mayor. Thank you, colleagues of the Culture Committee. Jordi, we will do our best to be there, whether it is in person or virtually, time will tell. And now, colleagues, listen to this music, grab a coffee.
You are muted.
Yes. Hello?
Yes, now we don't hear people.
Okay, it's me.
Who's talking?
It's Iñaki Susaeta, Secretary General of Region 4.
Than we used to do in physical meetings. And the second one, related to the discussions that we've had today, but also part of yesterday, is that we are all advocates. We are all advocating whatever our job description is. We are all advocating, and I think this session is for everyone, not only for people working in specific policy fields, but it's for everyone, for research, for learning, and all other colleagues. So before we kick off our interactive discussion, we have thought this session, this hour, in the way we want to shape policy with you. So it's a co-creation exercise. So we have seen we have foreseen some different tools for that. And before we get started, I just wanted to provide you with some brief elements of context and of our strategy. Colleagues, the PowerPoint. The first element here, and we've been discussing yesterday, so I don't want to repeat what is our dynamics, the ecosystem, but I think one of the lessons of these recent weeks is that core element of the bottom-up approach. We want to shape policy from the bottom up, and the policy councils have a critical role, and that connection with the consultation mechanisms. I think that came out also clearly in today's discussion. Second, I think we have, and sometimes we may forget it, but we have very robust resources to shape policies. We've been going through different charters today, but we have the Durban Legacy and the Decalogue that are extremely powerful resources. And third, obviously, we've been talking a lot about the legacy of Durban, that legacy of co-creation. But as we are a year and a half after Durban and a year and a half before Daejeon, it's a very timely moment to think together about how we want to shape that policy construction together. Look at this. We have those very robust resources on the continental policy feed to the World Organization. We have those thematic policy papers from the assembly track. And next slide, please. We have built this year a very strong campaign with UN 75, and let us not forget these were 9 months of consultations from inputs from all the regions of the world, all the sections, and also very connected to the global task force. So we have this now. We are taking stock of this, and before we kick the session off, some elements of context. Advocating today is not like what we did yesterday. Look at how COVID is changing the way we are advocating online. We have many new opportunities to connect. We have many new opportunities to voice towards the UN. I mean, we are basically a click away. We are also deploying many more partnerships than we did because we're saving a lot of time with the different missions. and we have gained a lot of trust in what we are doing, actually what we are doing today with the online tools. So these are critical stock taking of how we can shape the advocacy of tomorrow. Then we need to think about if we are going to this hybrid format, that all the parts of the world are connected, and that some parts of the world may not feel so at ease with the online tools. So and also this can impact the way that negotiations can be led at the UN if there are certain parts of negotiations that only take place on the spot. Before we start, I just want you to have these elements in mind. We have, I think, great achievements. We have these bottom-up policy consultations that are in place. We have those very robust resources. We have those strong spaces for co-creation. We are able to deploy very visible and very vocal campaigns and UN 75, but beyond. And we have also at our disposals those institutionalized instruments for deliberations, not only the policy councils, but the World Assembly, UNACLA, and also the Global Task Force as a space for co-creation. So what is next? I think it's up to us to shape it, but there is perhaps one word I want to keep the room with, is that notion of continuity. We have been providing those spaces through the town hall and assembly tracks for advocacy, but how can we make that continuous? How could we make that permanent? And before I give the floor to my colleague Jose, there is a very nice quote from Van Gogh. You know, Van Gogh moved to France, and I was reading his biography the other day, and he was actually trying to connect with his fellow artists, Paul Gauguin, among others, and they were thinking about, they were at the same level of improving their style, and they were trying to share new experiences to inspire themselves. And Van Gogh comes into this group and he says, all what we have is actually what we can all put together. And I think that struck me in a way that it's actually what we are doing here. We're doing great. We want to improve. We want to improve the way we're working. And what we are doing is actually putting what we have all put together. I'll leave the floor to Jose for our interactive exercise.
Thank you, Jean-Baptiste. Before we move on with the interactive exercise, I'd just like to add to this inspiring quote that everything that we've put together as UCLG for the last year, ever since the pandemic started, we started with our live learning experiences. We created together a decalogue for the COVID era, which is going to be one of the key bases of our advocacy for the coming year as we move towards our Congress. And I think that considering what everyone brings to the table and considering everyone and bringing everyone on board is critical for us to advocate together, to create a new form of cooperation, a new way of saying how we want to be at the global table and why we want to be at the global table. So if could you please, thank you. If you could please all go to menti.com and put the code 881419-2. We're going to go to an interactive exercise about our priorities for advocacy. Thank you. I think the first question is, what are the key challenges for our advocacy in 2021? What is the key challenge? What do the people in the floor think the key challenges for this year? After a very complex year with the pandemic, with the vaccinations coming up, we need to bring together the key issues for ourselves. I think obviously some of the ones that show up very clearly are always competences, ensuring good practices among us. And I can see some flashbacks to the previous retreat with synchronization. And I like one about taking the power, which is one that particularly sings to me. As you can see, there are many, many priorities. And I think everything that we are seeing
increasing budgets for local and regional governments, ensuring a seat at the table. I believe all of this fits well with our Pact for the Future. Next, could we go to the next question, please? And now I want you at the floor to be a little more ambitious, to see what is our advocacy in the future. We have many challenges ahead, as we've seen. We have a goal in mind, the Pact for the Future, the renewal of the priorities of UCLG in a little over a year and a half. And I would like you all to tell us what you see. I can already see it. We want a platform of platforms. We want to show systemic changes that leave no one behind. We want, I like the idea of the collective, of joining forces, of increasing our energy and our joint narrative in order to show ourselves more cohesive, more coherent in the international scene. I like the hybrid format that already Jean-Baptiste mentioned. I don't know if you'd like to comment on that. And also, I think it's very important, as the floor is showing us, to show that the decision-making is not just about national governments, but also that everyone needs to be on board. Thank you.
No, very, very interesting indeed. And it's good to see that some of your ideas, actually, most of them, we have them integrated. There is indeed one agenda, one part of the agenda that has been hard for us to work on with the online, is what we were doing with national governments, and it has come up 3 times here because it was a lot of direct connection in headquarters at the UN, etc. But this has come up quite strong also here. Before we, do you want to add something?
No.
Before we open the floor to the full group, we thought it was interesting to hear some of the inspirational experiences from our global task force partners. As I was mentioning, we had that very successful UN 75 campaign, an exercise, a true exercise of co-creation, and we thought that would be the right moment to actually think with them on how they have seen that exercise and how they envision the future of co-creation for advocacy. So I'd like to give the floor first to our sister organization, Regions for Development, for Sustainability, sorry. We have with us actually the boss, Secretary General Iñaki Suzaeta. Iñaki, as I was saying,
hello.
How did you, hi Iñaki, how did you look at that co-creation exercise, UN 75, and how do you see this joint advocacy together within the Global Task Force in the coming months?
Bueno, en primer lugar, nosotros fuimos muy activos en todo lo que fue la consulta de la ONU 75, colaboramos incluyendo en todos nuestros propios espacios, en nuestra Asamblea General, e incluso con la participación del presidente del País Vasco como presidente de Regions for en el evento de alto nivel del 8 de octubre. Pero la pregunta es cómo aseguramos a partir de ahora que los gobiernos regionales forman parte de la incidencia global. Yo creo que primero tenemos que contextualizar lo que tenemos actualmente, ¿no? Estamos en un contexto que está profundamente marcado por la pandemia mundial del COVID, pero también por la emergencia climática. Este contexto de múltiples crisis interconectadas presenta también una oportunidad para reorganizar las prioridades. Y a mí me gustaría apuntar 3 ideas. Primero, tenemos que involucrar a todas las redes que representan exclusivamente a regiones y a gobiernos locales en procesos de incidencia desde su inicio. Y luego, me gustaría indicar dos aspectos más. El uso del lenguaje importa, por lo que no se nombra no existe, por lo que tenemos que ser absolutamente rigurosos en los documentos de incidencia conjunta para que se incluyan los términos que realmente nos representan y para que se incluya la dimensión territorial. Y lo último que me gustaría decir es que es necesario seguir reclamando que se reconozca a nuestros gobiernos y a las redes que los representamos como actores gubernamentales y no como sociedad civil. Nuestra participación en la conversación mundial sobre los mayores retos para nuestro planeta y nuestras sociedades debe hacerse desde el mandato político que nuestros gobiernos tienen, como responsables sobre todo de los territorios que representan y de sus gentes, contribuyendo a la toma de decisión sobre las políticas de desarrollo sostenible. Para ello, sin duda, necesitamos sumar el apoyo de los Estados, sin duda, y tenemos que trabajar mano a mano con ellos. Y finalmente, Region 4 se pone a disposición de CGLU y a la subsección de regiones para pensar y diseñar conjuntamente cómo tenemos que hacer esta labor de advocacy en el futuro. Gracias por la oportunidad de intervenir en este retreat.
Thank you, Secretary General. Yes, I think we've heard the call, we've heard the commitment. I think there is permanent willingness to continue working with us, but also with the Agile Global Task Force on this. I'd like to turn with one of our really special partners and actually special colleague as well, because we have Cities Alliance with us on board, and we have Billy Comet, who is one of our very, very good friends on the line, who is also going to leave Cities Alliance, I think in a couple of weeks. So we'll be missing you for sure, Billy. But now that you are into this path of enjoying other moments, with all this experience that you've got, how do you look at this? I mean, what we've achieved with the Global Task Force, the power of advocating together, how do you look at this?
Thanks. Thank you for the introduction as the outgoing director, which is, of course, what I am. I have another 7 weeks to go. My first message is a very strong message, is an appeal to UCLG and the Global Task Force. And I know this is not in doubt.
Billy.
Do you hear me?
Perfect.
Okay. Is to keep co-creation. For me, the experience that we had in Durban and the invitation to mobilize our members and to deliver a policy product was absolutely fantastic. And this, for me, serves as a real basis for the way forward. I do see a real threat. You know, we are all waiting for the end of COVID, particularly when you look at the constituencies that I'm really talking about now, which is informality and slums, is that there is a huge danger that once COVID has passed, that we will need to have the message that the essential conditions have not changed and that the people are still there. But you know that member states and international development community, they will shift their focus overnight. And I think this is a danger that we need to think of. And that is why I think a roadmap that includes, not for the events themselves, but for the organizing ability that they provide. Obviously, COP26 is absolutely essential. And we would be very keen to draw the linkages between what I've just said about the retention of the communities, informality, and the climate change links. And we would take that also because of our geography into Afri-Cities, which has now been postponed into April of next year, because that's where it's such an important constituency. And I would also make an appeal, you know, for consistency of message. We don't need to go and look for new topics every year because things haven't changed. And so we would be very keen to work around our themes of informality and urban poverty and climate change. But I would highlight two. One always is the right to the city and what this means in reality. And the second, and this relates both to local governments and to community organizations, which is a focus on building institutional capacity over time, because both of those are fundamental failures. A lot of the things that we say that we want local governments and communities to do, they can't do because they don't have that capacity and those resources. So I'd really like to stay in the co-creation space, but keep focused on the fundamentals that really, really matter. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you so much, Billy. I think there are three things we're discussing here. First one are the messages, the advocacy messages. I think they're clear. We're working on this permanently through the Global Task Force and bilaterally. Two are the momentum you were discussing. We have COP26, we have many others throughout the year. and that is also on the agenda of the GTF. But three, and I think we should be able to tackle this in this part of discussion now, is the how. How do we connect all this? Which are the tools we can either create or either use better to work on that continuity of joint advocacy? I want to ask my colleagues upstairs. We have two other members of the policy team, Fatima and Rodrigo, who are monitoring and who are going to facilitate our group discussion now. I see that there are many messages in the chat. So perhaps one comment from Emilia and then
yes,
we'll
thank you, Jean-Baptiste. I think there are two aspects that both two very interesting things that Iñaki and Billy are bringing to us, and they are united in one single concept. That is, we don't need to invent all the time if we see that there are priorities that are still very relevant. And maybe the thing is, what we need to focus is on the intensity and the urgency, and that is something that concerns me when we make additional efforts to advocate. I think we have been extremely successful in the way that we have been advocating. We have been more successful when we have done it together, and I think that Billy was referring to that space of co-creation. But I think we need to put some sense of urgency. And if there is one thing that I feel we should be raising our voices to, our president say a cry for help, is the danger in which a local service provision is at this moment. People do not realize how heavy the investment has been during this pandemic. So while it remains in our priorities, Billy, you were saying it, informalities, Iñaki, you were saying it, a territorial approach. I think we need to add the sense of urgency now. And this year of the new urban agenda is very relevant, I think. So I wonder whether they identify with this, and whether maybe we would need to raise up with a joint campaign similar to what we did with SDG 11 to call for attention to these topics.
Very clear ideas, Emilia. Colleagues upstairs, Fatima and Rodrigo, how are the chat interaction going? And over to you for the next part.
Thank you very much, Jean-Baptiste, and thank you very much, colleagues, for the great inputs. Very nice to hear from you. We already received some comments on the chat box. I think some of them were very much aligned to what Emilia was just saying about the sense of urgency. For example, Octavi, the Secretary General of Metropolis, was emphasizing how our networks were very quick to get together and increase these joint efforts when the emergency really started. We also had a comment from Simone Giovetti saying that this new advocacy should be targeted at inventing a new and global form of local citizenship. And indeed, this is what we are also proposing to do with the Pact for the Future. So this new social contract on how we can make this new way of interacting with the planet, with people, with the governments. Fatima, I know that we have prepared some questions just to open the debate so colleagues can reply.
Yes, thanks a lot, Rodrigo, and thanks a lot for summing up really well what was the conversation about. I would just add to those that there were mentions also to the elephant in the room, like how to monitor the impact of global advocacy, and also how to enhance those mechanisms of meaningful dialogue with the different levels of government. So apart from different views, there were some questions. We invite you to keep reflecting on those and on the ones posed also by our Secretary General and the former participants. And also let us ask you as well, what does it take to advocate with UCLG? How can the World Organization, we from here, from the Secretariat, build on the example shared with its sections from the different parts of the network. So we want to hear from you, and correct me if I am wrong, Rodrigo, but we don't see any hands raised yet. So I would ask you not to be shy, first of all. And we have the Secretary General of CMR, Frédéric Barrière, who is asking for the floor. So please, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Happy to open open the discussion, or rather follow Billy. No, just a question. Well, a question and a reflection from my side. We have been advocating and calling now for a long time to get a seat at the table, to participate in discussions at UN level, to be involved in different forums. And I think we have been quite successful in doing so, being visible and participate. When I think of the World Urban Forum or the COP or other important events or meetings. But I wonder if now we are not in a moment where we need to have a stronger position on what we advocate for, not only being at the table, but calling for concrete measures. And for that, what is, I think, important in this moment, and this is very much in link with what Billy was saying also, we are in a state of change, and this COVID crisis is going to change completely the way we work and we live, and hopefully that can bring a new step towards transition and a new society that we have been calling for many years now. But the way the governance is going to be organized is something that will be dealt at national level, at continental level for us in Europe, and a little bit at global level, but not so much, I believe. So how can we bring together the different perspective of the advocacy that we need to do to make sure that the messages that are sent at global level at the UN correspond to also what national associations or individual local governments are advocating for in their constituencies, and what we advocate towards the European Union or UCLG towards the African Unions, and ASPAC towards the Asian, whatever levels of decision making. We see that there are different perspectives, of course. There's the financing part, which will be crucial as we hit the economic crisis. But there's also, I think, a big chunk of governance issues. We have seen that the pandemic has re-centralized quite a number of decision-making in a number of countries where we believe that this way of doing was very inefficient, at least in Europe. But how are we going to redesign the structures of governance to enable local and regional governments to be more in the decision seat of their own actions on the ground? So that's the kind of reflections that I think we need to have together to be stronger and to have a roadmap that brings us all together.
Thank you very much, Federica. I think that's a very interesting reflection. In regards to what you're saying on what we advocate, I think we are creating a lot of spaces to really build these joint narratives. So what is it that this crisis, especially right now, is impacting our constituency, local and regional governments, and what exactly they should be asking at the global level? So we definitely are looking to the issue of governance. For example, there is the initiative among UCLG, LSC, and Metropolis regarding what does governance look like or should look like during emergency, something that had started even prior to the outbreak of the COVID-19. But definitely how the governments, the different spheres of government interact among each other definitely reflects at the global level. We have some interesting cases of very good interaction between cities, regions, and the national governments, and how, for example, when the national governments come to the international forum, they bring delegates from these other spheres of government as part of their national delegates. This is just an example. I can see now that Emilia also wants to make a comment. Colleagues, also feel free to ask for the floor. Emilia, with you.
Yes, thank you, Rodrigo. I think this is a very interesting part of the conversation. Well, first of all, the detaching global advocacy from domestic affairs is usually very useful if you are trying to represent and to transform the local level. Sometimes, if you approach it from a national or regional perspective, you get stuck in domestic issues. Let us take, for instance, human rights, or let us take dictatorships. Dictatorships are usually, they are pushed out by the people in the country, but they are also supported by external forces. So this is one thing, and I think we need to identify in which area do we add value. I think this is a very relevant part of the discussion. I don't agree with Frederic that there will be little at global level that we need to advocate for. I think that we actually need to advocate for a lot at global level, because the transformation that we're asking is a planetary transformation. However, it needs to be anchored in the needs and realities of the local and the regional level. That I fully agree with. And I think that this maturity that we are trying to not only foster, but also build upon in the organization is now focusing on, okay, where do we add the most value? And I guess the framework that we're trying to picture here is the Pact for the Future. And I have a direct question now for Billy and for Iñaki, which is, would a global campaign, in the case of Billy, would a global campaign around repositioning SDG 11 and linking it with local service provision, do you feel it would make a difference also for the issues that Cities Alliance is defending? And in the case of Iñaki, how can we position the debate of territories internationally? What do you think is missing? Is the system of cities that we are proposing an entry point for this, or do we need something else? So I leave it there, but I think I'm really grateful for Frederic's points, because I think it really helps us move ahead.
If I may, I didn't mean to say that it was little what we need to do at global level, Emilia. What I meant is that we need to see what messages we bring at global level that will impact the domestic and
agreed.
Agreed. Thank you for the provocation and the interesting exchange. I think the key is less about the levels, because you will be operating at all levels. I think the conversation we need to have, and Emilia's provocation opens it up, is that the message has to resonate outside of the constituency, so that we're not having a conversation with ourselves about getting our own seats at that table, and it's of no direct benefit, or it's not clear what the benefit is to the residents and the citizens. And therefore, I think a very practical focus on, Emilia's given the example of hard services. I mean, the absence of services is one of the defining features of COVID-19. It is that which we take for granted, missing in these communities, that has caused so much damage and danger. And as I said in my beginning, I fear that when COVID has gone, whenever it is next year, that then the attention will disappear again with it. And so, yes, I think very much tangible, so that audiences outside of our direct constituency understand that here is a constituency, local and regional governments, fighting for everything we want, and it has a global resonance. Of course, we can discuss how and the detail, but in practical terms, absolutely.
Colleagues, Fatima and Rodrigo, any hands, any comments in the chat relevant to continue our open tour?
Iñaki might want to come in as
well. Yes.
Sí, quisiera
Iñaki,
hacer simplemente quisiera hacer un comentario sobre este contexto global que estamos viviendo. Está claro que la pandemia de la COVID nos va a dejar en una situación distinta. Eso tenemos que ser absolutamente justos y transparentes diciéndolo. Estoy de acuerdo que desde nuestros niveles de gobierno y desde nuestra responsabilidad con nuestros ciudadanos, con el territorio y con el resto de ciudadanos de los otros territorios que configuramos todo este colectivo que estamos aquí, tenemos que ser capaces de hacernos oír y que nuestra voz política tenga realmente impacto. Para lo que yo pido, por favor, que se empiecen a pensar en nuevos mecanismos en los que realmente no seamos simplemente unos instrumentos para el despliegue de las políticas mundiales, sino que seamos agentes activos en el desarrollo de esas políticas. Más que nada por las implicaciones que alguna de ellas tienen en nuestro territorio. Por ejemplo, la COP26 este año va a dar un gran impulso a la estrategia de adaptación al cambio climático. Y esas estrategias de adaptación al cambio climático se dan a nivel regional y se despliegan y se implementan a nivel regional. Simplemente quería añadir esta idea al debate y volver a felicitar a CGLU por esta iniciativa súper interesante sobre la advocacy y cómo hacer mejor advocacy en este nuevo contexto que nos va a tocar vivir, y yo creo que va a ser más que el año que viene y siento ser más allá del año que viene. Pero bueno, gracias Emilia, gracias CGLU.
De acuerdo,
Gracias,
muchísimas
Iñaki.
gracias.
Sí, Rodrigo, adelante.
No, antes de nada quisiera saludar a Iñaki y claro, un abrazo a todos los colegas del País Vasco. Un gusto teneros también en esta sesión. Pues yo creo que habéis hecho comentarios muy complementarios a la vez. Now switch to English. Billy, for example, was saying the importance of us getting these messages out of our constituency. And this is something that we definitely share. And that, for example, we have been trying to develop these links with civil society, with other major groups that have a space at the United Nations. And it's really about creating this ownership. So when we are talking about, for example, strengthening the capacities of local and regional governments to provide basic services, this should be a request not only coming from the constituency. Everyone is interested to receive good quality and universal services. So I definitely agree that it's important for us to start combining these advocacy messages with advocacy messages that other groups are doing, as we are trying to do, for example, with the agenda on gender equality. Fatima, how do you see it? Any other comments coming from to your side?
Yeah, well, thanks a lot, Rodrigo. My key comment is that I am very excited to see that this conversation is not about a seat at the table. It's way more complex. It's made of very different perspectives, and it has a lot of diversity concerning the challenges, but also the added value of the different actors. It shows us that what we do at the Global Task Force is very relevant, but also our way of trying to be inclusive and to mind for the language, as we were thinking and we were saying before when referring to a new concept of local citizenship, to which, for instance, my area relates a lot, but also speaking about the territorial approach and so on and so forth. So
I see a lot of diversity. I see a lot of variety. What I don't see is any hands raised. I don't know if Emilia or the colleagues in the floor want to take the floor.
Fatima, yeah, we have heard a lot of ourselves first of the team, but we have heard a lot of European voices as well. Even though they represent global organizations, I think it would be good to do a very short tour of sections or tour of different world regions now beyond Europe. So I would ask, for example, to Africa that was presenting today its priorities, its main concerns. How do you link this with what we just presented? Any UCLG Africa colleague here in the room?
And there is also a very good conversation going on between Simone and Diana. So they might want to raise their hand and just take the floor.
Well, yeah, maybe, yes, it's not perfect, but I always say, let's go back to 10 years ago. I think they're clearly listening more now than 10 years ago. On the UN, at least, the HLPF at the COP, all the mechanisms, the voices are there. I know this is not perfect and we have to keep advancing, but I always say, let's take a view of where we were 10 years ago and where we are now. But I am always the optimistic. Over.
Simone.
Yeah, I mean, what I'm saying is that when UCLG was created, I remember years ago, our main goal was sit at the table of United Nations, have a space to represent local authority. I think it is still a valuable goal, but really I'm asking myself if we observe the reaction that national government has on this pandemic, and my question is, there is a real willing to change things from their side. So I think that we have this willing. So I'm asking myself that really are really listening us, or we need to raise our voice or completely take our personal street to go further.
Thank you for this, Simone. I would continue the tour of different sections and committees with Octavi here in the Group Secretary General of Metropolis.
Octavi just made a comment in the chat, so I think he's around.
Octavi, are you here with us?
Yes, I am. Sorry, I had problems with my computer. Yeah, no, I think that the conversation today is very interesting because as well, we're talking about this focusing, how to focus our advocacy. I think we have done a long way together. I mean, we have learned, if we look back to the way up to the Agenda 2030, to Habitat 3, the way we're working as well in the context of the Global Task Force. I mean, we have made a lot of progress. I think our challenge now is, and these discussions that we are having with Diana on the chat, is not only protecting, of course, focusing our advocacy, it's also protecting the spaces that we have conquered, but as well we need to not only acknowledging, and it is important that we are being listening, but how we can monitor and also how can introduce what we say, and Emilia says always, this transformative impact of local governments, and how we can monitor this impact. I know it's not easy, but I know at the same time that we have experiences in the European Union and advocacy in the European Union. So I think that's could be the next step in our advocacy strategy. Also to show that we are pushing and we are transforming certain issues.
Thank you, Octavi, for this. I think you're very right in the sense that I was referring to this at the beginning, even though this was very brief. But if you look at beyond a year, if you look at the 15 past years, the achievement is huge. SDG 11, the World Assembly has gained incredible strength, but also the comments that were made before by Iñaki and Billy. I think we've also made progress to resonate beyond our constituency. Perhaps not entirely heard by member states, but look at what we've achieved with civil society. So this is a little bit to contextualize a little bit from the comments. I want to. There are two others. There are two other issues that I've noted down: impact and traceability, which are very much linked. Maybe for advocacy, it's difficult to monitor your impact and to make things traceable. But these are things that we have noted down, and yes, we'll continue discussion on this. Emilia, at this point, further comments?
Yes, no, I wanted to invite Jordi Pascual, coordinating our committee on culture, because like we did in the case of SDG 11, we have been working with other cultural stakeholders in joint campaigns, that have been very successful. And I think this is where the comments of Octavi were going as well. I mean, it's what we are trying to do with cities. Cities are listening and the whole town hall process. And I was wondering, Jordi, whether you could give us some ideas about the latest on that type of campaign. And there might be an interesting model for us to continue working on. Certainly, I think, for instance, the work that we are doing with civil society and the special rapporteurs of the United Nations can gear towards something like that. Can you tell us about this latest initiative that you and I were working on a couple of days ago only, reframing that campaign?
Yes, Emilia, thank you very much for this opportunity. Muchas gracias. Indeed, the advocacy of global cultural networks, say, begin 7-8 years ago, when we imagined that a culture goal was not possible politically, but technically, and also as a strategy, it should be launched, that campaign, and we did it. We wrote how a culture goal would look like. This document is still in our website. We published it in 2013, together with global civil society organizations that work in the area of culture. They are all represented in all cities and countries around the world. The International Council of Museums, of Monuments and Sites, the International Federation of Libraries. Almost all cities around the world has a library. The International Music Council, also with associates all over the world, and many other. Culture Action Europe, Arterial Network in Africa, the Federation of Coalitions for Cultural Diversity, which is one of the key allies of UNESCO. This goal probably today is still not feasible because of, I would say, lack of ambition of some of our partners, self-censorship. But when we analyze the SDGs, we realize that at least half of them are as intangible or inaccurate as the targets that we were suggesting for culture were. So it is not a matter of technical consistency. It is sometimes a bottleneck in trusting what is really important for people. And sometimes this is a bit more difficult to measure than economists and physicists believe. We are reframing the campaign. Yes, we have been analyzing all the reports to the high-level political forum in 16, 17, 18, 19. We noticed some progress. from some states, considering culture is a fundamental vector to achieve the SDGs. To name a few, Greece, Uruguay, Vanuatu, New Zealand, some other. And we are working to make this campaign better known with clear targets. And we are writing also something like a vision document so that new networks can join, and so that, yes, we are more visible, and also more visible, as Billy Cobbett was saying, what other constituencies may wish to celebrate or join this advocacy. Health, for example, why not? We have in our research, we know that participating actively in cultural life saves money to the public budget in health, and many others. Security also, it also saves money. We need these arguments to be better refined, better communicated, for sure. This is where we are, Emilia. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Jean-Baptiste. I was, something that I was thinking about while I was hearing these inputs is that, and this is something for the room to consider whether I am right or wrong. In order to come to upgrade advocating and to upgrade campaigning, like Jordi was describing, like what we did for SDG 11, you need to detach the advocating from the branding potential that a campaign has, and using that as your visibility tool to the international community. I think in the past, and it has been very useful and it has been very successful, and I am not saying that we shouldn't do it anymore. Of course, we are going to be doing it because we need all the branding that we can get. But probably our next step, that extra mile in advocacy, is going to be letting go on the branding and do the effort that we are making with the Global Task Force, with the campaign that Jordi was just describing, with the efforts that we have been doing with Cities Alliance, etc. So it's something I wanted to just leave there, because this is what the retreat is for. We need to be upfront, honest with each other. I think we need, even the different parts of UCLG will need to jump into this, and we need to focus with our partners more on those very urgent messages than on the visibility that participating in these campaigns can bring. So I was wondering whether that is also slowing down some of the important issues that we are bringing to the international community. So I don't know if I am being provocative enough. There might be comments. I know we don't have much time left, but any thoughts on this, or maybe just think about it. Can you identify a bit with that, Jose and Jean-Baptiste? Jose?
I was afraid you're gonna get me out of a job, but I think you're right. I think that as we say, los futboleros, we say that attack gets you games, but defense gets you leagues. And I think this is part of it. Big campaigns can definitely raise awareness, but I think it may not be enough, and it may not be. Our advocacy isn't just what we show every time we go to an international sphere, every time we're at the HOPF, every time we get our hashtags trending on Twitter. I think our advocacy is that, of course, but it also runs a lot deeper than that. And the coordination efforts done within the Global Task Force and every little step we've taken over the past years is definitely a huge part of our advocacy, and that not everything is what we see.
Yeah. Well, thanks. I see that we have a colleague from UCLG Africa, Jean-Baptiste, that has answered for your call to intervene. And I also see that Simone is there. And then I would like also Rodrigo to talk about an idea that he put in a chat. So Jean-Baptiste, do we still have a few minutes?
Yes, let's hear our colleagues, perhaps starting with UCLG Africa that we haven't heard in this session. Simone directly. Okay, Simone, go ahead.
Okay, just an idea because we are brainstorming a little bit in this session. I like it. Maybe, I don't know, national newspaper campaign or interview or our name, our face. I think that it can be also an idea to work on. I think that I did it in France and we succeeded with some contacts to have a paper on Le Monde during the pandemic about an initiative we launched. I think that is a great also space that we can try to use to raise our voice. Thank you.
Very well noted, yes. Very active campaigns in papers also in Spain. We've been doing also some agreements with The Guardian, etc. Parts of the network are very active on this. I had UCLG Africa, I think, connected.
Risa Ketia, yeah.
Yes.
Oui, bonjour tout le monde. En fait, je voulais juste apporter une petite contribution par rapport à la stratégie de plaidoyer. Il y a un intervenant qui m'a précédé qui a souligné sur le fait que est-ce que depuis longtemps nous faisons les mêmes plaidoyers, mais est-ce que nous sommes vraiment attendus? Justement sur ce point, je pense que par rapport au plaidoyer, notamment auprès des États, comme l'a suggéré Monsieur le secrétaire général de CCRE, il serait peut-être bien de penser en fait à la pérennité de la stratégie en question. Qu'est-ce que je veux dire par là? Il serait peut-être bien, sur des thématiques bien définies, qu'on puisse au moins déléguer une représentation, notamment au niveau de l'ONU, mais aussi par rapport aux différentes sections régionales, par exemple au niveau africain, qu'on puisse peut-être mettre en place une délégation auprès de l'Union africaine. Donc, je pense que par rapport à cette stratégie, ça va permettre en fait une certaine pérennité dans la prise en compte de nos propositions, de nos préoccupations. Et je pense que ça serait une bonne idée quand même. Merci.
Merci, Monsieur Driss Keita. Non, ça rejoint les commentaires qui étaient faits précédemment hein, sur l'impact. Hein. Comment évaluer l'impact d'un plaidoyer? Est-ce que c'est l'inclusion d'une référence dans une déclaration ou est-ce que ça va un peu plus au-delà sur la prise de conscience, hein, raising awareness. Le plaidoyer, c'est aussi la prise de conscience internationale sur certains sujets. Je crois qu'on avait une autre demande d'intervention et ça serait l'une des dernières parce qu'après, on va commencer à clôturer.
Yes, well, I had seen an interesting comment from Lamine, our colleague from ICMPD, working on migrations and our project on MC2CM. I don't know, Lamine, if you are ready to share your concern and some comments here.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Emilia, for the opportunity. Sorry, I have a back issue, so I'm not really comfortable with putting the camera. In any case, I wanted before I did a comment on the need to have maybe more bridges between national and local governments. I think here something that I'm listening and that it's very interesting for me is also the need maybe to enhance the collaboration between international organizations and the constituency of local governments. I think the call that has been done by UCLG, UN Habitat and ICMPD on the International Migrant Day is an example. It's also an echo to what Simone was saying in using the media and the newspapers to have more voices. So I think this is a very important aspect, but I also build on something from where we're trying also at a project level to work, is also to see how these commitments at the international level, we can translate them into the domestic discussion. Frédéric was mentioning this at the beginning. And I think here there is still a lot of work to do to manage to make this recommendation and these steps that are done at the international level to make them actionable in the domestic discussion. So there, I think some reflections are needed and maybe some pilot initiatives could be interested to be developed. Thank you.
Thank you, Lamine, and thank you for being straight to the point and very clear at the same time. Well, I think we are about to close. I just wanted to wrap up in 1-2 minutes, unless there are urgent comments to be made. I see the chat is still very active.
Elena wanted the floor. Jean-Baptiste.
Elena Pierce from the Federation of Canadian Municipalities. Over to you.
Thank you. And I just wanted to make the point around the development cooperation paper that we're working on. That tool really, from where I sit and where many other people sit, really helped with our advocacy in leading up to the SDGs and the other international frameworks that were adopted in around the 2015 period. And so now looking at this new development cooperation paper and what that will mean, I really am excited about the research that we're undertaking with IDS to inform what the direction is. But I think to Lamine's point as well is that development cooperation is equally relevant to our national context, and thinking about development cooperation not in just Canada going over overseas to country X, but how does that country also contribute to the work and to the advancement of policy and advocacy back in Canada, for example. And so I think that collectively there needs to be some attention placed on that paper. It will be the work of the CIB and others, but I really encourage others to participate in that, because I do think that that will help shape a lot of our advocacy in the years to come.
Thank you, Elena. Any other comments from the room, colleagues? Otherwise, we'll start to wrap up. That's your last opportunity.
Talk now or never talk again. Yes.
If not, I'll start to wrap up. I think one of the first statements in this session was, let's keep co-creating, and I think that's going to be our mandate for the next months, and through the Global Task Force, but through the mechanisms that we have. And I want to link with what we've achieved with the policy councils last week. Is the beginning of that process to also co-create from the ground. So I think let's keep co-creating, but based on the needs of the membership and of the partners. Second, I think came out strongly today is still that seat at the table. It's stronger because of the crisis that we are undergoing. That of course is our daily mandate, but with the new urban agenda for this year, with the World Assembly, with the continuous work to the development agenda and the HLPF. Also, we haven't talked about it, but the efforts made towards the G20 and the Urban 20 initiative, you can count on us. And third, and I think that will be my last point, is yes, let's keep thinking together about how we can think about a future of the Assembly track. I think that was a very successful part of Durban, because we have been able to feed the global advocacy with the original priorities. And I think that's been a great added value for us too. But let's think for the next period until Daejeon, how we can make that continuous and permanent. So I'd like to thank everyone for the contributions. Thank the team here at the ground floor, but also upstairs. And over to you, Emilia, to wrap up for the day.
Yes, I have a few tasks, and I feel bad because we didn't give the floor back to Rodrigo, but he will be with me tomorrow throughout the day in the main stage. So he will have his say about this idea that he was sharing with me in the chat. We'll have many opportunities. I want to congratulate you, team, for opening up this debate, for daring to open so much the debate. I wanted to show colleagues how we are working with Mural, and your inputs are there. Those are your inputs for the day. So please feel free to visit that and to get used to using it during the rest of the retreat. And one of the last tasks that we have is to actually evaluate how the day went. And for that, I am calling back Fernando Santomauro, our colleague from the learning team, to do a Mentimeter again. And we are about to finish this.
Thank you.
For your participation, Fernando. Dos preguntas solo, ¿eh?
Dos preguntas, perfecto.
Adelante, adelante.
So very quick. So go to menti.com and use the code 3228904. So Menti 3228904. So the first question would be, well, we had like a very rich day, right? So I want to know better your how would you rate your experience from 1 to 10 in the second day. So the Africa priorities, the cities are listening, the breakout rooms, the migration, digital rights, accessibility. There you go.
Very good. Well, people have been listening. A lot of participation, more than yesterday in the Menti. Colleagues, it's important that you make this effort, because we do need to understand what you're finding useful, what works and what doesn't. And if this does not reflect reality, then we will be in trouble for next time. We will offer the wrong thing. What is the second question?
So the second one is it's a little bit more open. So the idea is that you could define in one word, what would you like to know more about what has been discussed today? Or if you could highlight idea in one word. That
this could be the seed towards a new Cities Are Listening session, or a new program, or a new campaign. So colleagues, what are we missing here? Any inputs on this? Maybe we covered everything we had to cover.
Yeah, right.
I hope. There, local citizenship. Yeah, I like that one. Co-creation mechanism, advocacy opportunities. We need to discuss this further, right? I mean, I feel as if we were getting started with this conversation before, and I think a very health. Yes, you are right. We have very little health in this retreat as well, and we are starting to work much more with health issues. So yeah, maybe something to take into account for tomorrow and for Thursday. Learning opportunities, culture goals, accessible planning. Whoa, many things up there. But health is certainly missing, and we will try to make it up in the coming days. Remember, colleagues, thank you very much, Fernando.
Thank you.
So remember, tomorrow, one more day of our annual retreat, focusing on nature, UCLG, working for nature. And we are starting tomorrow morning at 10:30 with Asia Pacific priorities. Please, those of you that are able to join for that time zone, do participate in that session as well, because it's very, very interesting to get the regional perspectives. Then get ready for nature with inspiring talks and hopefully very interesting discussions. 5 breakout sessions again, and then the Americas priorities. Colleagues, thank you for being there. Congrats, team. We are starting to enjoy this new global home. So big. Thank you. Bye.